I'm thinking today of my late Uncle Paul, my Uncle Tom, who is still with us, and so many others. Marty's dad,
father,
and uncles, and
mother, grandfather.
All Kodak workers at one time or another, engineers, employees of one kind, and all the hundreds of friends we've had over the years who've worked for this company.
And still do. I have family who still does work for the company, yeah.
Eastman Kodak's filing for bankruptcy is one of those stories that requires a whole bunch of perspective and explanation, because you hear bankruptcy and you think it means they're locking the doors on State Street and shutting the company down. That's not true at all. The question is, will Kodak survive this and, as they hope, come out on the other side as a viable entity? And that's a huge question right now, and it's for the experts to basically speculate on, because even they don't know. So we'll be doing that. What did your dad do at Kodak?
Oh, he worked in a couple different places. He worked in the garage for a while there. He did purchasing. He was at 333 and 65, and I think 65 is gone now. That was in Florida.
Only in Rochester would we refer to where we worked as a number.
Yeah.
And that's so common at Kodak. If you worked at the park, you went by the number of the building you worked in.
Yeah.
And that was such a. And
always used to go to Building 28, to the bowling alley there.
Building 28 was where the theater was too.
Yeah,
it was the theater on the Ridge, and all that. So many great memories of that company's heyday. And you know, you've got family from your husband's side?
My aunt-in-law actually has a number of patents through Kodak.
Yeah.
Yes, has worked there for a number of years and has done some extraordinary work. And I always want to ask her about it, but oftentimes we're together doing family things.
She probably can't tell you.
And it's maybe a slightly uncomfortable topic too. So we just stick to the safe topic of Red Sox versus Yankees.
I had a friend in the research lab, an acquaintance in the research lab, and even if he could tell me, I wouldn't understand. So that's the kind of, I just wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it.
But it's amazing how many people who worked for and still work for Kodak hold these patents. Aren't we one of the higher per capita cities?
Between Xerox, Kodak, and Bausch & Lomb, there's an awful lot of science out there that started in Rochester. So anyway, we've got extended team coverage. Norma Holland, Evan Dawson. We're going to be talking to George Conboy, Bloomberg Business News, and many others as we cover Kodak's midnight filing for bankruptcy protection on 13 Wham News this morning.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News This Morning, now in high definition.
A historic day for our community, 130 years after it was founded, 30 years after its employment peak, Kodak has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Good morning. It is 5 o'clock, Thursday, January 19th. I'm Doug Embley.
And I'm Jennifer Johnson. So much to cover. We're going to get right into it now. News of Kodak's filing comes after really weeks of speculation. It happened at midnight.
It did. This morning, we're going to tell you as best we can what it all means for the company, its employees, retirees, investors, and this community. We begin our team coverage with Norma Holland, who is live at Kodak headquarters on State Street this morning. Good morning, Norma.
Yeah, good morning, Doug. You were talking about your families being impacted or having had contact with Kodak, if you will, over the years. My mother worked at Kodak when I was just before I was born. So you'd be hard-pressed to not find someone in this community who hasn't been impacted by Kodak throughout the years. This is a copy of today's paper. And if you look closely, it says Kodak files for bankruptcy. This is called a replate. I was just handed this by Karen Magnuson, Vice President of News at the Democrat and Chronicle. She says they've worked throughout the night, of course, to create this new edition. They do this on occasion. The last time you may remember a replate, as they call this, was back on 9/11, although they've done it throughout the years and for various reasons. But this news came just after midnight, and it certainly has been a very long time in the coming, if you will. Back on January 10th, we're going to give you a timeline of sorts of all of the activity that's been happening throughout the recent weeks. You may recall back in November, the company said it would run out of money in a year if it didn't sell its valuable patents, for which it had hoped to make billions. Then on January 10th, the company said it was splitting its operations into two divisions, commercial and consumer, possibly setting the stage for a sell-off of that consumer division. And then just last week, Bloomberg Business News said Kodak was in talks with Citigroup to provide bankruptcy protection and bankruptcy financing, I should say. Then Kodak announced several lawsuits against Apple, HTC, and most recently, Samsung. And then, of course, Doug and Jennifer, you mentioned the employees, all of those employees who've been coming to work every day, not really knowing what's in the future for them. They have said morale is at its lowest point ever, and Kodak CEO has a message for them.
Employees will continue to receive their usual wages, healthcare coverage, vacation, and other benefits without interruption. Putting these protections in place has been our top priority for day one.
In recent weeks, there have been seminars for retirees, of course, who have concerns about what this means for their future, their health care costs, and their pensions. Coming up, as you said, we're going to hear from Brighton Securities President George Comboy, who is going to answer some of those questions. And, of course, we're going to hear from Evan about what Chapter 11 bankruptcy really means. Is this the end of the company or perhaps the start of something new? Reporting live downtown from Kodak's world headquarters, Norma Holland, 13 WHAM News.
All right, Norma, thanks. We hear frequently about companies and corporations filing for bankruptcy. This happens all the time.
Yeah, what exactly does it mean, though? That's the question. What does it mean for you, too? Evan Dawson is breaking it down for us live from the newsroom this morning.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Think of Chapter 7 as the end. A company in Chapter 7 has to liquidate its assets. There is no coming back and having a successful future. Chapter 11 actually comes first, and if a company can successfully go through Chapter 11 and restructure, it might never have to go through Chapter 7. Now, that's what Kodak is hoping as they file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. What does it mean for stockholders? Well, to begin with, the New York Stock Exchange will delist Kodak stock. It closed at 55 cents a share yesterday, and the annual gathering in February for investors will be canceled. What does this mean for shoppers and camera owners? Kodak says shipments will continue, refunds for products will still be honored, and warranties are still valid, same as they ever were. Now, any company that goes through Chapter 11 obviously has a difficult road ahead, but there are success stories. A few companies that have restructured through Chapter 11 and come out stronger: Delta Airlines, Kmart, Delphi, some companies that you might know. Now, those companies did have to lay off some of their workforce to survive, and there's no way of knowing what Kodak is going to do with its remaining workforce. That is one of the big questions. Every company that has survived Chapter 11, kind of restructured, come out stronger, has had to go through some layoffs, but certainly not all. The goal is to retain as large and successful a company as possible. Reporting live in the newsroom, Evan Dawson, 13 WHAM News.
Evan, thank you. Just want to mention, too, if you're looking for more resources, Kodak has launched a new website overnight that focuses on the reorganization plan. There is information for employees, investors, customers, and suppliers. You can check it out by going to 13wham.com, then click on that green Find It button. It is also where you can watch the full statement from CEO Antonio Perez. We'll be bringing bits of that to you throughout the morning.
Kodak has been getting smaller for years after reaching a peak Rochester employment of more than 60,000 in the early 1980s. Today, it has about 7,000 employees in Rochester. It has closed 13 manufacturing plants and 130 labs. It has raised or sold off much of the old Kodak Park, where Kodak did most of its manufacturing over the years. So Kodak has filed for bankruptcy this morning, and we're going to continue to explore what it means for this community. So many people work there, so many still do.
You know, it's every morning at this time we have a live report from Bloomberg Business News. And Jay King comes to us from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I believe that she's able to join us right now. Good morning, Jane. I want to ask you, this is big news up in Rochester. How do you think the market's going to react this morning when everything opens up?
Absolutely is. Well, it's not totally unexpected. As you know, this has been rumored for the past couple of weeks, and we've known for years, actually, that Kodak was slipping behind. It really reached its peak in the 90s, but since then has not been able to keep up with the new digital era the way it needed to. And, you know, it was working on new technology like that as far back as the 80s, but the shift away from film was something the company didn't commit to until it was just too late. Cheaper, more attractive products flooded the market. You had HP, Canon coming out with products that competed with Kodak's products. And then, of course, there was this whole shift to using cell phones to take pictures and sharing them, which might have been the final nail in the coffin there. And the stock has been hammered until creditors were just pounding at the door there. So the bankruptcy filing was really just inevitable. We knew it was coming here for the last couple of weeks.
Sort of going from the language of what Kodak is saying, they've said they've secured $950 million in debtor-in-possession financing from Citigroup. Can you explain more about what that is?
Well, the company's credit just really deteriorated, especially recently. It's headed for its 6th straight loss in the past 7 years. Now, Citigroup has agreed to provide a $950 million loan to help them restructure. So basically, you know, I compare it to like Borders books. I mean, they liquidated. They went out of business. What Kodak's trying to do is just give it a little breathing room to try to restructure here and keep some of these creditors at bay. Also, Bank of New York Mellon, it is Kodak's biggest creditor. They're owed a lot of money. It also owes money to Sony Studios, Warner Brothers, so a lot of investor interest here in what is going on, and a lot of interest in the company restructuring and then eventually being able to pay back some of that money. And as I mentioned, it's getting some of it from Citigroup. It's essentially money that allows the company to keep operating, and by definition, this type of loan has to be approved by a bankruptcy judge. So there's going to be a lot of courtroom time going on here for Kodak and the attorneys. Kodak will probably also have to agree to sell assets as part of its bankruptcy restructuring. In fact, this morning, they're saying significant amount of assets will be sold, and that's what the bankruptcy judge said in a court filing. So we'll see what actually happens here. But the goal here, give it a little breathing room, try to restructure, come out as a leaner and better company.
In your experience for covering financial news for years now, do companies come out of this? Is this a move that generally moves them in the right direction, or is it the beginning of more of the crumbling?
Well, it all depends on how the company restructures and if they come out with products. And if they can do this right, they can absolutely come out and be a stronger company. It's happened over and over again. We've also seen companies liquidate and not come out of them. So, of course, we saw the automakers. They had government assistance. It's a different situation, but they've come out stronger. So if the moves can be made right and can be made smartly, it can absolutely come back as a stronger company. So, sad to see an icon happen like this. I heard one analyst say, in its heyday, it was like Apple of its time. So certainly tough to see this happen, and we hope they have the best here and have a successful restructuring, come out of bankruptcy soon.
All right, Jane King, live from Wall Street this morning. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
She mentioned the automakers, and it is one of those things that occurs to me. There was a time when Kodak might have been considered too big to fail. Not anymore, for sure. And so they're going to have to go bankruptcy the old-fashioned route and see what they can do to reinvent themselves again.
We have much more for you this morning as we can cover all angles of this morning. We're going to take a look back at Kodak's history dating back to the 1880s.
Also be talking with the president of the Eastman Kodak Retirees Association. They've been very active and are really trying to get as much information as they can out to the many retirees of Eastman Kodak Company.
Because it could be scary waking up hearing this news if a lot of your finances are tied up.
I have heard a lot of information on this in the last few days, and one of the things that the Kodak retirees are being told is this is not the day your benefits, health care or pension get cut off. This is a long-term thing, and there's no immediate cause for worrying about what's going to be in your mailbox or your bank.
In fact, the CEO saying, this business is going to go on as usual. Everyone should expect all that stuff to continue flowing.
Yeah, at least for now.
You can check for the latest developments and information for you on online, 13wham.com. We do have a link on the Find It button to the company's statement and the reorganization plan. And we mentioned Kodak CEO Antonio Perez has put together a statement explaining from his viewpoint everything that's going on. It's about 6 minutes if you want to check it out there.
And Marty is here now with a preview of the forecast. Bitter cold morning out there.
Chilly morning, yeah. Most areas in the teens now, and we'll see a pretty good run up in some of the temperatures throughout the day today. Not a warm afternoon, but back to average. We do have some snow in store for us, and some of that is sitting well to our west right now, that little system across Michigan. That's going to affect us later in the day. We'll talk about that and the upcoming weekend. All that right after this.
Breaking news alerts and your Weather Authority forecast with Doug Implage, Norma Holland, Evan Dawson, Jennifer Johnson, and meteorologist Marty Snyder. This is 13 Wham News and High Definition, your breaking news and weather authority.
That is a live look at Kodak headquarters, 343 State Street, Rochester, New York. And we begin this morning a new chapter in the history of this 130-year-old company. The former film giant announcing at midnight that it had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Company CEO Antonio Perez says business will go on as usual. Employees will be paid, and we knew this day would come. There'd been talk of bankruptcy for several months.
At midnight, Kodak announced it filed for Chapter 11. And Kodak said late last year would likely run out of cash by the end of 2012. So this bankruptcy allows some money to come in. CEO Antonio Perez says business will continue as usual as it reorganizes its debt. That means everyone needs to go to work today. We'll have more coverage of this coming up throughout this morning's broadcast.
And we are going to hear from the man in charge of the Eastman Kodak Retirees Association. They've been very good about getting information out to retirees. Lots more coming up as we continue our team coverage of Kodak's Chapter 11 filing on 13 Wham News this morning.
Good morning. The company that invented film and introduced the $1 brownie camera more than a century ago has filed for bankruptcy. Eastman Kodak filing for protection against creditors after failing to keep up as the world shifted from film to digital photography. Meantime, American Airlines may be losing cockpit control. Analysts say its bankrupt parent is running out of time to restructure as possible buyers circle overhead. And Facebook adding a whole new bunch of apps to make itself more of a media hub and open up new opportunities for ad sales. The apps allow you to share more photos and other news with friends using companies like Pinterest, Ticketmaster, and Rotten Tomatoes. And bad news if you're planning on spicing up this year's Super Bowl with some wings. I'll tell you why after this.
Bloomberg's Business Report is brought to you by Fidelity Investments.
So much more for you ahead on this broadcast. We're going to actually have the latest on that cruise ship disaster off the coast of Italy.
And one of your stories coming up as well, but what we're really covering this morning is the latest on the Kodak Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. It happened at midnight. Stay with us.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News this morning. Now
At a
in
cost of
high definition.
$3.4 billion in restructuring into the growth and profitability of our new businesses while accelerating the decline of film.
That is Kodak CEO Antonio Perez saying the company business is going to go on as usual, as it announced overnight that Kodak has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Good morning, 5:31 on what's a day a lot of people are going to remember, Thursday, January 19th. I'm Jennifer Johnson.
And I'm Doug Embledge, and Norma Holland is going to begin our team coverage this morning. She is out at Kodak's State Street headquarters. The news of this filing comes after weeks of speculation. Norma, hello there. What's the word down at Kodak this morning?
Well, Doug, as you can imagine, since we're standing outside of a pretty dark and quiet building, we've not been able to talk to anyone so far. This has been a long time in the coming. Kodak says that it will take about 18 months for all of this restructuring to happen, so it's going to be some time. But as you said, Kodak says it's business as usual. Let's take you back, though, to November. This has been a while in the making, when Kodak first said that it would run out of money in a year if it wasn't able to sell off its valuable patents. It had hoped to make billions from that. And then in January, on January 10th specifically, the company said it was splitting its operations into two divisions, commercial and consumer, possibly setting the stage for a sale of that consumer division. And then just last week, Bloomberg Businessweek said that Kodak was in talks with Citigroup to provide bankruptcy financing, which we have now seen has come to fruition. And then Kodak announced several lawsuits against Apple, HTC, now Samsung. And then, of course, the employees, all of them, for weeks have been wondering, would this day really come? And what would it mean for them? Well, Kodak's CEO, Antonio Perez, has a message for them.
Important to emphasize that the reorganization process allows us to accomplish this while at the same time we protect employees who will continue to receive their usual wages, healthcare coverage, vacation, and other benefits without interruption.
So
Putting
there you
these
have
protections in place.
Well, so there you have it. We hear that the employees will continue to be paid, so they still have jobs, which is, of course, good news to them. But what about the retirees? They've been wondering what all of this means for them. There have been seminars being held on this for those retirees who want to know, will I have health insurance? Will my pension, will I still receive my pension? All of those questions are being answered today. We'll have more coming up on that with Brighton Securities President George Comboy, who is going to talk to us as he has for the last several months about what this really means and whether Kodak can emerge from all of this a leaner and more profitable company. Reporting live downtown Norma Holland, 13 WHAM News.
Speaking of those retirees, ECRA, an association of Kodak retirees, released a statement shortly after the filing, stating that while we are saddened by the Kodak bankruptcy filing, we will now execute the plans that we have already prepared in anticipation of bankruptcy to fight for retirees' pensions and benefits. Bob Volpe, he is the head of the Retirees Association. He also explains that Kodak cannot make any benefit changes until it appoints a committee of unsecured creditors and discusses the claim with the company. He is going to join us live next hour.
Many in Rochester are thinking of George Eastman this morning. Of course, he created the film that made capturing memories easy. Point and click, and you could create a photograph. Kodak's slogan, you press the button, we do the rest. Eastman brought us the first transparent photographic film, his first camera, 1888, most well known in that era, the Brownie camera. Over the decades, Kodak technology evolved. Americans continued to buy point-and-shoot cameras. You popped a roll of film in, took your photos, and had them developed. By the 1990s, Kodak was still producing film, and disposable one-time use cameras became extremely popular. Kodak was also making digital cameras in the 90s, those parallel technologies. But the company's transition from film to digital actually lagged behind consumer demand for digital, and that ended up being a major factor in the loss of thousands of jobs and bringing us to this bankruptcy filing today.
Well, probably everybody in this town has an opinion on Kodak. We posted the news of the Chapter 11 filing on our Facebook page. We asked you what you thought. And here are some of the responses. Just Sue says, I think they will survive, but they will continue to shrink their staff at manufacturing to a more reasonable size to compete. Donna says, it is sad, though not unexpected. To think this probably would not have happened if the powers that be would have taken digital seriously back in the day. I hope it can recover. You can tell us what you think of the news on the 13 WHAM News This Morning Facebook page. Evan Dawson also standing by. We're going to get to him a little bit, sort of talking about the difference between, this isn't stop, let's sell everything. This is Chapter 11 is different from Chapter 7. Everyone's going to go to work today, business as usual. As CEO Antonio Perez says, he's going to sort of say the difference between when you're liquidating and everything that's not happening versus what is happening in Kodak. So stay tuned for that coming up. You can check for the latest developments, of course, on our website too, 13wham.com.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 WHAM News This Morning, now in high definition.
We are covering breaking news with extended coverage of Kodak's filing for bankruptcy, a historic day, 130 years after its founding, 30 years after its employment peak here. Kodak has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We heard from CEO Antonio Perez overnight.
What everyone should expect from Kodak is business as usual. Business as usual for our international operations, which were not part of the filing, and business as usual for our U.S. subsidiaries, because the Chapter 11 process enables that.
And supposedly business as usual for employees and retirees, but waking up hearing this news, we know you have a lot of questions. We're going to do our best to answer most of them on this Thursday, January 19th. I'm Jennifer Johnson.
And I'm Doug Embledge, and we're going to continue to cover Kodak this morning.
News of the filing for bankruptcy comes, after weeks of speculation. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, this is not a surprise. It happened at midnight, and this morning we're going to tell you as best we can what it means for the company, employees, retirees, investors, and this community. We begin our team coverage now with Norma Holland, who is live at State Street headquarters. Good morning, Norma.
Yeah, good morning, Doug. As you heard the CEO, Antonio Perez, talk about, the company believes that it has enough money to operate during this bankruptcy, including that $950 million Citigroup loan in order to pay its employees. The CEO has a message for those employees as they wake up and hear the news this morning.
And employees will continue to receive their usual wages, healthcare coverage, vacation, and other benefits without interruption. Putting these protections in place has been our top priority for day one.
And that is certainly good news for those employees who are going to be arriving this morning. We've seen already some of them come to work this morning, and they have a lot of questions. But as we said earlier, this has been a long time in the coming. Back in November, the company said that it would run out of money in a year if it couldn't sell off its patents, which are, of course, valuable, which was expected to bring in billions of dollars. And then on January 10th, the company said it was streamlining its operations, splitting into two divisions, consumer and commercial, possibly setting the stage for a sell-off of that consumer division. And then, of course, there were the rumors of bankruptcy that we'd heard for weeks. The company did not respond to those. Bloomberg Businessweek saying just last week Eastman Kodak was in talks with Citigroup, which, of course, is true. Citigroup is financing this bankruptcy. And then Kodak announced those lawsuits against Apple, HTC, and now Samsung. So once again, what does this mean for the company long term? The company says it expects to emerge from bankruptcy in 2013, hopefully a leaner and more profitable company. Norma Holland, 13 WHAM News.
All right, thanks, Norma. We hear frequently about companies and corporations filing for bankruptcy.
But what exactly does that mean for the company and for you, too, especially if you're an employee, a retiree? Evan Dawson is live in the newsroom to explain the difference here.
Well, guys, think of Chapter 7 bankruptcy as the end. A company in Chapter 7 has to liquidate its assets. There's no coming back and having a successful future. Chapter 11 bankruptcy comes first. And if a company can successfully go through Chapter 11 bankruptcy and restructure, it might never have to go through Chapter 7. And that is what Kodak is hoping. They are filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. What does it mean for Kodak stockholders? Well, to begin with, the New York Stock Exchange will now delist Kodak stock. It closed at 55 cents a share yesterday, and the annual gathering in February for investors is canceled. What does this mean for shoppers and camera owners? Well, Kodak says shipments will continue, refunds for products will still be honored, warranties are valid just as they have always been. And any company that goes through Chapter 11 obviously has a difficult road ahead, but there are success stories, a few companies that have restructured through Chapter 11 and come out stronger on the other side. Delta Airlines, many of the airlines, in fact, the major airlines, Kmart, Delphi, those companies laid off some of the remaining workforce. There's no way of knowing exactly what Kodak will do with its remaining workforce. Reporting live in the newsroom, Evan Dawson, 13 WHAM News.
All right, Evan, thank you. So many people waking up with questions this morning. We knew this was coming, but now that it's here, we turn to an expert in our community.
Yeah, George Conboy of Brighton Securities is with us this morning. You've been following this so closely, George, and in many ways have been the face of a significant segment of our coverage of Kodak. Your first blush reaction, I know you're not surprised by this.
Doug, unfortunately, we're not surprised. We've been expecting it for months. It's always a little surprise that it happens to be today as opposed to yesterday or tomorrow, but we felt it was inevitable for the last few months.
What does this mean down the road? Is your sense that Kodak is going to maybe realize its most optimistic predictions coming out of this a leaner and profitable company?
Well, it will certainly come out of this leaner. I think it will be smaller. It's a little bit like someone who has a heart attack and goes in and has a quadruple bypass. You come out and you don't run marathons anymore, so you're going to weigh a little bit less as well, and that's going to be true of Kodak. Whether they will come out profitable, healthy, and growing, I'm not certain. The difficulty is management's credibility at this point is not too high based on what we've heard in the past. What we expect is some divisions will be sold or shut. There may or may not be layoffs. There may not be too many layoffs. And in fact, if you work for a unit that's being sold, the new owner may invest in that unit and you might be just fine. But at the end of it, and I think the end will take at least 18 months, Kodak will emerge with some businesses and go on and hope to be a profitable company. It's not unheard of.
What is working at Kodak right now? We talk about what Kodak's going to do going forward. They've sold off so much of what they used to be. Film is dying. What could Kodak emerge as in terms of, when people ask, what does Kodak do? What would they say?
I think there are two things. There's motion picture film, and while that's going to have a finite life, motion picture film is not going away in the next year or two. Remember, to put in digital projection equipment in every little theater in South Africa and Argentina and British Columbia and everywhere else, very expensive proposition. So movie film is going to last another 4, 5, 6 years, I think. In addition, the graphics business, the big printers and services for industry, they'll try to retain that. What I think you'll see them sell will be the grab bag of consumer digital businesses, the small digital cameras, maybe the Kodak name for use on consumer products, probably the inkjet business. They're not making any money on that stuff.
Final question for you, George. Would Kodak have been better off, or at least some of Kodak's constituencies been better off, if the company had been bought out as opposed to filing for bankruptcy?
Well, I think the best way to illustrate that would be look at the businesses over the last 20 years that Kodak has sold off, spun off, the Carestream imaging business, the Johnson & Johnson blood analyzer business, ITT Geospatial, which has the satellite business. How about Eastman Chemical out in Tennessee, which is a $6 or $7 billion business now? All of those are businesses that Kodak got rid of. All of those are businesses that were invested in by their new owners and actually are doing just fine right now.
What, I said last question, I lied. What becomes of Antonio Perez at the end of all of this?
Well, there's a big question, isn't it? I don't know if Mr. Perez is really the cause of Kodak's bankruptcy or whether he inherited a mortally wounded company. That's for history to sort out, I suppose. But he has been unusually upbeat. I mean, it's a job of management to be upbeat. But he's been unusually upbeat, I think, to the point where Wall Street and the average Rochesterian doesn't give him much credibility anymore. He seems to say the same thing, that we're marching into the brilliant future, whether it's 6 months ago or today. And I guess we'll watch for his actions during bankruptcy, and we'll find out.
George, we reserve the right to call you many times in the next 8 hours.
I reserve the right to speak to you, Doug.
All right, thank you, George. George Conboy from Brighton Securities.
I want to mention the weather. It's been so up and down lately. Marty's standing by with the full forecast. We're going to get to that a little bit later. And still to come this hour at 6:15, Doug's going to look back at Kodak and what led the company to where it stands now.
At 6:45, a Kodak retiree to discuss the breaking news that's coming up after the warm weather that's affecting some retailers in an unseasonable way.
Breaking news alerts and your Weather Authority forecast with Doug Imblage, Norma Holland, Evan Dawson, Jennifer Johnson, and meteorologist Marty Snyder. This is 13 Wham News and High Definition, your breaking news and weather authority.
And we continue to cover the Eastman Kodak bankruptcy filing this morning. Earlier this month, I spoke to a former Kodak insider to get his perspective on Kodak's troubles. Paul Allen was Kodak's spokesman for decades, and he told me he thought the company would have been better off if a friendly buyer had come along, as opposed to what could happen now that bankruptcy has been filed. His opinion, the company should have removed the so-called poison pill provision that would prevent such a buyout.
To get top dollar for their technology and intellectual property, to get a favorable ruling on their patents from the Trade Commission in September, and to preserve the Kodak brand. A bankruptcy will not provide any of those resources. It can only provide protection from creditors and a nice severance package for executives.
Kodak had said the poison pill provision was in place to protect current shareholders. Essentially, a poison pill is something they put in place to prevent a hostile takeover of a company. Can be removed if the board of directors feels, okay, this bid is something that would be good for us going forward.
Okay.
Paul Allen believed the poison pill actually prevented maybe something better from happening. He thought a big buyer might be able to come in and with deep pockets and be better off for all those Kodak constituencies. So.
All right. Well, hopefully we will be talking about a better company 18 months from now.
We'll see. Yeah, we've got a lot more to talk about with Kodak. Evan Dawson's going to join us next. He has some thoughts on all this, and he's found a place where we actually posted on the web some answers to your questions. We'll continue our Kodak coverage on 13 Wham News this morning next.
You know anyone with questions about Kodak, and that's a lot of people asking about what bankruptcy means for Kodak. We've tried to address all of those questions. Right now on 13wham.com, there's the headline. Answering questions about Kodak's bankruptcy, Chapter 11 is not Chapter 7. We explain the differences. We refer to Wall Street analysts who estimate that about only 1 in 20 companies that files for Chapter 11 ends up surviving long term. But Kodak's odds might be better than the 5%. Large companies have a better history with Chapter 11. And certainly Kodak is not the 60,000 employee behemoth it once was, but it is a bigger company than most that file for Chapter 11. One thing you don't see companies do is go through Chapter 11 and come out a larger company. This is a time to cut further, usually, come up with a plan to become profitable. And if you have any more questions, please join the discussion on Facebook, email me, join us on Twitter. We'll try to answer them all throughout the day.
And you mentioned 60,000. That was Rochester employment.
Yes,
Worldwide
yes.
was more than twice that.
Exactly. Great point.
Hard to believe. All right, thanks, Ev.
Yep.
We're going to have much more for you as we continue on this news that Kodak has filed for Chapter 11. Be right back.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News This Morning, now in high definition.
We are hearing this morning as we cover our breaking news from Kodak CEO Antonio Perez, who says to expect business as usual. This is the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at midnight today. Good morning. It is 6:32. It's Thursday, January 19th. I'm Doug Embledge.
And I'm Jennifer Johnson. More on our top story. Let's get right to it. News of the filing comes really after weeks of speculation. We've been saying this is probably coming down the pike.
It happened at midnight, and this morning we're going to tell you as best we can what it all means for the company, employees, retirees, investors in this community. We begin our team coverage with Norma Holland, who's been live at Kodak headquarters this morning. Good morning, Norma.
Yeah, good morning, Doug. We're starting to see those employees trickle into the building this morning, and you can only imagine what they are thinking. They're wondering about their jobs, their future, and what this bankruptcy means for them. Here's what Kodak CEO Antonio Perez has to say to them about their future, at least in the short term.
What everyone should expect from Kodak is business as usual. Business as usual for our international operations, which were not part of the filing, and business as usual for our U.S. subsidiaries, because the Chapter 11 process enables that.
As usual, and Kodak says it expects to re-emerge from all of this in 2013, hopefully a leaner and stronger company. Really quickly, you've heard of the phrase "stop the presses." That's what happened this morning. The Democratic Chronicle, when it got the news just after midnight, it literally stopped the presses to reissue and reprint this version. Kodak filing for bankruptcy. It's a day full of history, as you can only imagine. A lot of people will want a copy of this edition, and it is out for sale this morning. Reporting live at Kodak headquarters, Norma Holland, 13 Wham News.
What about the retirees? Well, the Association of Kodak Retirees, ECRA, released a statement shortly after the filing stating that while we are saddened by the Kodak bankruptcy filing, we will now execute the plans that we have already prepared in anticipation of bankruptcy to fight for retirees' pensions and benefits. Bob Volpe, head of the Retirees Association, also explains that Kodak cannot make any benefit changes until it appoints a committee of unsecured creditors and discusses the claim with the company. Volpe is going to join us coming up at 6:45, answering a lot of your questions that you've been giving us on Facebook.
We have more coverage throughout this morning's broadcast and throughout the day today.
You can check for the latest developments and information right online at 13wham.com.
And up next, Kodak's bankruptcy, what it does mean for the company's future, the retirees. We're going to get an expert in to talk about how retirees can expect this to affect them. Stay with us.
13 Wham News, brought to you by Burgundy Basin.
The Burgundy Basin.
We felt we got so much more than what we thought we would.
You just felt like you were part of their family. They went out of their way to make that a special day.
The Burgundy Basin, where personal service creates a lifetime of memories.
Delicious chicken salad with celery.
To have their medical covered by Kodak.
And then temperatures gradually come back up through the weekend. Could see an area-wide snow heading into Saturday, about 30 for a high then as that next system begins to draw through. We'll get up to about 39 getting into Sunday with at least some breaks of sunshine returning, and then some rain by Monday, 45 for a high then.
Real quickly, Marty, your Kodak connections, your dad and others, right?
Yeah, my dad worked at Kodak and retired from there, and mother was there up until I was born, and grandfather was there, a couple uncles were there.
Wow,
Yeah.
a lot of history there. And Jen has a friend who worked in the research lab,
My
or does.
husband's family.
Yeah. And
And
I had
uncle.
two uncles are Kodakers, or were. And we're going to be talking about Kodak retirees a lot today. 13 Wham's Evan Dawson joining us now. We're going to be providing information, answering their questions all day long.
Well, how about just a little straight talk with our viewers? We've been telling you that Bob Volpe is going to join us at 6:45. It is 6:45. And you think he's a busy guy? He's the head of the Eastman Kodak Retirees Association. So we're still waiting to get Bob on the line. And the second we do, we'll certainly bring that to you. We've got a lot of questions from viewers, not the least of which are questions like this from Becky. She says, "This breaks my heart. Will my mother-in-law be able to keep her health insurance and small pension from her husband's 40 years of service? He passed away last year." But then you hear from people like Jerry, who says the yellow box workers might, and then again, might not be in for a surprise when it comes to their medical. They never understood how lucky they were to have their medical covered by Kodak. I'm a retiree of RG&E, and I have to pay a big portion, and this is the reality. Welcome to my world. So there's a bit of a kind of a back and forth going on, and so let's do this. We're going to go to break now. We're going to see if we can get Bob Volpe on the line as soon as we can. He's the head of the Eastman Kodak Retirees Association. He's been in huge demand this morning, and the second we have him on the line, we will share those answers with our viewers.
Generalities are dangerous in answering questions like that, but one thing I have heard is the pensions are probably the most secure thing of all. Healthcare is not going to change immediately. It might change down the road.
According to Perez, no, he says that's going to continue.
Yeah. All right. When we come back, your Morning Rush nonstop news until after 7 this morning.
We will be right back. Let's get back to our top story. News of Kodak's filing for bankruptcy comes, well, after weeks of speculation now.
It happened at midnight. This morning, we're going to tell you as best we can what it means for the company, its employees, retirees, investors, and this community. We begin our team coverage with 13 Wham's Norma Holland, who's live at Kodak headquarters on State Street. Good morning again, Norma.
Yeah, good morning, Doug. We're starting to see activity down here at those world headquarters. Behind me, you see the building itself, the headquarters, and those lights, those office lights. You start seeing. We've seen them come on now more this morning, and behind each of those windows is an employee wondering, what does this mean for me? Do I have a job? Will I still be able to provide for my family? It's hard. You'd be hard pressed to find someone in our community who has not been touched by Kodak. Here's what the CEO says to those employees this morning.
And employees will continue to receive their usual wages, healthcare coverage, vacation, and other benefits without interruption. Putting these protections in place has been our top priority for day one.
So there you have it. Those employees have been assured that they will still be paid. They will still be able to get their benefits. And that is, of course, perhaps a bit of comfort on this frigid, freezing morning and a history-making morning. Kodak has a $950 million loan from Citigroup in order to operate during this bankruptcy process. The company says it hopes to reemerge a stronger, leaner, better company in 2013, but as of this morning, we're a ways away from that. So it remains to be seen what will come from today. Reporting live downtown, Norma Holland, 13 Wham News.
And the Eastman Kodak Retirees Association is out with a statement this morning, came shortly after the filing. It says, while we are saddened by the Kodak bankruptcy filing, we will now execute the plans that we already have prepared in anticipation of bankruptcy to fight for retiree pensions and benefits.
That comes from Bob Volpe, who is head of the group. He explains that Kodak cannot make any benefit changes until it appoints a committee of unsecured creditors and discusses the claim with the company. We're doing our best to get Bob Volpe on the phone to answer a lot of your questions. If we don't have him now, we'll have him on Rochester CW as well.
We hear frequently about companies and corporations filing for bankruptcy.
But what exactly does it mean for the company? What does it mean for you, too? Maybe not exactly what you think. Evan Dawson is here now to explain.
Let me just fill in one detail. We just heard from Bob Volpe, 7:30 on Rochester CW. We will talk to Bob live at 7:30. Apologize for the delay. He's been a very busy guy this morning, but please join us at 7:30 on CW, especially if you know any retirees. Now, think of Chapter 7 bankruptcy as the end of a company. A company in Chapter 7 has to liquidate its assets. There's no coming back and having a successful future. That's not Kodak, though. Kodak's in Chapter 11, which actually comes before Chapter 7. And if a company can successfully go through Chapter 11 and restructure, it might never have to go through Chapter 7. So that's what Kodak is hoping as they file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. What does it mean for stockholders? Well, we'll begin there with the stock exchange. Delisting Kodak. That's going to happen shortly. Kodak stock closing at 55 cents a share yesterday. The annual gathering in February for investors will now be canceled. What does this mean for shoppers and camera owners? Well, Kodak says shipments will continue, refunds for products will still be honored, and warranties are still valid. No change there. Any company that goes through Chapter 11 obviously has a difficult road ahead, but there are success stories. A few companies that have restructured through Chapter 11 recently come out stronger. Delta Airlines, American Airlines, Kmart, Southwest Airlines, a lot of the airline industry, Delphi. So those are some of the companies that did survive it. They had to lay off some of their workforces, and there's no way of knowing if Kodak is also going to be coming out with more layoffs soon. Reporting live, Evan Dawson, 13 Wham News.
All right, Ev, thanks. Kodak launched a new website overnight focusing on the reorganization plan. There is information there for employees, investors, customers, investors, customers, and suppliers. You can check it out by going to 13wham.com, click on the green Find It button. And also, coming up on Rochester CW, the full statement from CEO Antonio Perez right at 7 o'clock, and you can also find it on that Kodak site.
We know that Kodak's been getting smaller for years now. By the numbers, after reaching a peak employment in Rochester of more than 60,000 in the early 1980s. Today, it has about 7,000 employees in Rochester. It has closed 13 manufacturing plants and 130 labs worldwide, and has raised or sold off much of the old Kodak Park, where Kodak did most of its manufacturing over the years.
We are thinking this morning, I think a lot of people are, of George Eastman and what he did for our community. And that company created the film that made capturing pictures easy, point-and-click photography. Kodak's slogan, remember, you press the button, we do the rest. It was before our time, but we all learned about it. Eastman brought us the first transparent photographic film. His first camera debuted in 1888, most well-known, the Brownie. And over the decades, Kodak technology evolved. Americans continued those point-and-shoot photography practices. You popped in a roll of film, took your photos, then took them off to be developed. By the 90s, Kodak was still producing film, and disposable one-time use cameras became very popular. But Kodak was also making digital cameras by then. The company's transition from film to digital lagged behind consumers. It cost thousands of jobs, or at least it was one of the factors, and brought us perhaps to today's bankruptcy filing.
As soon as we heard about this, we posted the news on the 13 Wham Facebook page and asked you what you thought. Here are some of the responses. Josu says, I think they will survive, but they will continue to shrink their staff and manufacturing to a more reasonable size to compete. Donna says, it is sad, though not unexpected, to think this probably wouldn't have happened if the powers that be would have taken digital seriously back in the day. I hope it can recover. What do you think? We want to know. Go to the 13 Wham News This Morning Facebook page and leave your comments. And of course, much more as we go throughout the morning's broadcast coming up on Rochester CW.
Look back at Kodak's history coming up. We're also going to be talking with the president of Eastman Kodak Retirees Association at 7:30. And again, the latest developments and answers to your questions are on 13wham.com. We have a link on the Find It button to the company's statement and reorganization plan.
Well, today we're starting off with at least some breaks in the clouds.
Off Eastman Chemical, which is headquartered in Kingsport, Tennessee.
To do that, I thought
that system moved through and some lake effect set up overnight. Could see a couple or a few inches of snow in the most persistent bands overnight tonight. Down to 22 for a high tomorrow. More of a widespread area-wide snow on Saturday. Likely some accumulation out of that. 30 at that point. Closer to 40 by Sunday with some sun. Probably some rain on Monday. And then hovering pretty close to 40 into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Now back to the news desk.
Thank you so much, Marty. And just a few minutes from now, we're going to go to Rochester CW, continue 2 more hours of coverage of the Kodak story.
Well, you know, we've been hearing clips from Antonio Perez, the CEO of Kodak, in the video this morning. We thought our viewers deserved to hear the full statement if they want to hear it in full. It's about 6.5 minutes long, and we're going to play it right off the top of the CW in about 1 minute. We're going to play it in full. And if you want to hear the full statement from the CEO, we're going to do that. I thought George Conboy from Brighton Securities made an analogy that really helped crystallize what we're seeing today. He said, think of Chapter 11 bankruptcy as like quadruple bypass. It can be painful, but you can survive it. But if you do, you don't come out generally and still run marathons and do what you used to. Sometimes you're a little slowed down or you're changed by it.
Here's an at the time it was a minor, well, relative, it was a small part compared to the colossus of Kodak. It is now worth, stock price worth $5.5 billion. It is thriving, and you just can't help but wonder, how would Kodak be doing if it still had that profit center to draw from?
I just want to mention, too, people waking up sad at this news, but Diane wrote on our Facebook page, Kodak does still have a pulse. Time for us not to give up.
You got it.
Rochester CW.
See you there right now.
Yep.
Breaking news and weather authority. This is 13 Wham News this morning on Rochester's CW in high definition.
Well, we're going to do things a little differently this morning. We want to get right to an important piece of news, as you saw happening all morning long at 13 Wham. Kodak filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at midnight. And we continue to cover this major story over the next 2 hours.
That's right. We've been playing clips from CEO Antonio Perez's statement on bankruptcy. Right now, we have an opportunity to bring you that entire statement. Here is Kodak CEO Antonio Perez.
Good morning. I would like to take this time to answer a few important questions about Kodak in light of our decision to file for reorganization. The people of Kodak have made great strides in transforming this company over the last several years, but more work remains ahead of us. We're taking this step at this point in our transformation in order to build the strongest possible foundation for the Kodak of the future. Much like a number of other successful U.S. companies before us, Kodak will use the Chapter 11 process to accomplish important goals. In our case, we have 4 objectives. First, to provide our customers, vendors, suppliers, and employees with a greater measure of confidence in our position through the addition of significant new financing that adds to the cash we have at hand already. Second, to fully enforce Kodak's intellectual property rights against industry players that have infringed on our proven and valuable patents in the area of digital imaging, and to facilitate monetizing our non-strategic IP assets. Third, to ensure our remaining legacy costs related to our transformation are fairly apportioned and scaled for the digital company of the size we are today. And fourth, to allow Kodak to invest more effectively in the businesses and market opportunities that will drive our company's growth in the future. It is important to emphasize that the reorganization process allows us to accomplish this while at the same time we protect employees who will continue to receive their usual wages, healthcare coverage, vacation, and other benefits without interruption. Putting these protections in place has been our top priority for day one. Since 2004, Kodak has reinvented itself and undertaken a major and challenging transformation in the face of both a precipitous secular decline in our film business. For instance, our consumer film business has been declining by 40% per year, and a difficult global recession. In the first phase of our transformation between 2004 and 2007, and driven by the decline of film, we closed 13 factories, 130 photo labs, and reduced our workforce by 47,000 in a socially and economically responsible way, with no significant work disruption, at a cost of $3.4 billion in restructuring charges. At the same time, we moved to create a new digital business portfolio for the future, leveraging our brand strength and unique knowledge and leadership in digital imaging, materials science, and, deposition technologies. We knew that a transformation of this scale and this complexity could take significant time and resources. By drawing from the strength of our intellectual property asset portfolio, we were able to generate over $3 billion in licensing revenues since 2004 to fund the necessary investments in our digital businesses. The global economic slowdown of 2008 to 2010 changed our path, however, cutting into the growth and profitability of our new businesses while accelerating the decline of film. Low interest rates also significantly increased the effective burden of our legacy liabilities that came from a company that had more than 100,000 employees not many years ago. Finally, when it comes to intellectual property assets, we have seen certain key industry players follow a litigation strategy of delay, and this has resulted in Kodak not being paid what it was rightfully owed, given the depth and quality of our proven digital imaging patent portfolio. The board and management team, after consulting with our advisors, decided the filing for reorganization, while a very difficult decision, was the right decision to make at this time. What everyone should expect from Kodak is business as usual. Business as usual for our international operations, which were not part of the filing, and business as usual for our U.S. subsidiaries, because the Chapter 11 process enables that. Customers should know that we are going to remain focused on meeting their needs and ensuring they will continue to receive the same quality products and services from us as always. Our vendors, suppliers, and other business partners should expect payment in full for goods and services they provide us going forward. And employees will continue to receive their usual wages, healthcare coverage, vacation, and other benefits without interruption. Putting these protections in place has been our top priority for day one. We are all excited about our future. We will now be well positioned to complete our transformation and write the next chapter in the history of the world's leading material science and imaging company for the digital age. Competing in large markets where we have fundamental technology advantages, such as in digital printing, in packaging, in functional printing and materials, etc. It is my hope that today's announcement will provide all of us, together with our stakeholders worldwide, a greater measure of clarity and confidence about Kodak's path forward. Thank you.
Kodak CEO Antonio Perez speaking on the occasion of Kodak's filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Many questions that many people have about what this means for our community, for this company, for the people who work there. You can go to 13wham.com. We have a link there to what Kodak is saying, a new website that they have posted overnight, information about Kodak's reorganization. And Evan Dawson has posted as well some questions, answers to questions that people are asking of us. So those stories are on 13wham.com this morning. What you don't get on television, you can get from the web.
Yes, thank you very much, Doug. And that coverage certainly continues throughout the morning and the day.
We have so much more for you coming up. Marty's going to be back with a full forecast, or we're going to not go there now.
Yeah, a bit of a discombobulated morning. And Marty, we'll send it over to you and take our minds off Kodak for just a bit. What's going on outside?
Well, I have a little sunshine to speak of.
All right.
For the short term.
There you go.
Something different to talk about there. But yeah, we're starting off with at least some of that clearing in place, which of course will translate into some sunshine initially. But as we head through the day, back into some snow showers by later in the day today. Now, we're starting off with that clearing. Temperatures mainly in the teens right now. But there's that one system just off to our west. You look out into lower Michigan there, pretty much centered just in that one little area. That will pass through as we head later into the day today. And that's going to bring at least some snow into the picture, mainly centered on the afternoon hours for us. And do expect at least a minor accumulation in some places. Could see up to an inch of accumulation. And also, it's going to be occurring through the afternoon, leading into the afternoon commute time frame. So that's something to consider as well. Now, with the combination of that and
you, this is big.
Jennifer Johnson and meteorologist Marty Snyder. This is 13 Wham News on Rochester's CW in high definition.
All right, we're starting out cold, just 17 degrees, and we have some snow coming today. Maybe not a lot of snow, but right around rush hour coming home tonight is when we think snow's coming in. Maybe an inch, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but enough that, if you're in the wrong spot at the wrong time, it could be a little ugly out there. We hope it's not. Otherwise, high of 32 today. Continuing our coverage now of Kodak's Chapter 11 filing. Earlier on 13 Wham, we talked with our correspondent with Bloomberg Business News. Jane King was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when she talked with our Jennifer Johnson.
Good morning, Jane. Want to ask you, this is big news up in Rochester. How do you think the market's going to react this morning when everything opens up?
Absolutely is. Well, it's not totally unexpected. As you know, this has been rumored for the past couple of weeks, and we've known for years, actually, that Kodak was slipping behind. It really reached its peak in the 90s, but since then has not been able to keep up with the new digital era the way it needed to. And, it was working on new technology like that as far back as the 80s, but the shift away from film was something the company didn't commit to until it was just too late. Cheaper, more attractive products flooded the market. You had HP, Canon coming out with products that competed with Kodak's products. And then, of course, there was this whole shift to using cell phones to take pictures and sharing them, which might have been the final nail in the coffin there. And the stock has been hammered until creditors were just pounding at the door there. So the bankruptcy filing was really just inevitable. We knew it was coming here for the last couple of weeks.
Sort of going through the language of what Kodak is saying, they've said they've secured $950 million in debtor-in-possession financing from Citigroup. Can you explain more about what that is?
Well, the company's credit just really deteriorated, especially recently. It's headed for its sixth straight loss in the past 7 years. Now, Citigroup has agreed to provide a $950 million loan to help them restructure. So basically, I compare it to like Borders books. I mean, they liquidated. They went out of business. What Kodak's trying to do is just give it a little breathing room to try to restructure here and keep some of these creditors at bay. Also, Bank of New York Mellon, it is Kodak's biggest creditor. They're owed a lot of money. It also owes money to Sony Studios, Warner Brothers, so a lot of investor interest here in what is going on, and a lot of interest in the company restructuring and then eventually being able to pay back some of that money. And as I mentioned, it's getting some of it from Citigroup. It's essentially money that allows the company to keep operating, and by definition, this type of loan has to be approved by a bankruptcy judge. So there's going to be a lot of courtroom time going on here for Kodak and the attorneys. Kodak will probably also have to agree to sell assets as part of its bankruptcy restructuring. In fact, this morning, they're saying significant amount of assets will be sold, and that's what the bankruptcy judge said in a court filing. So we'll see what actually happens here. But the goal here, give it a little breathing room, try to restructure, come out as a leaner and better company.
In your experience for covering financial news for years now, do companies come out of this? Is this a move that generally moves them in the right direction, or is it the beginning of more of the crumbling?
Well, it all depends on how the company restructures and if they come out with products. And if they can do this right, they can absolutely come out and be a stronger company. It's happened over and over again. We've also seen companies liquidate and not come out of them. So, of course, we saw the automakers. They had government assistance. It's a different situation, but they've come out stronger. So if the moves can be made right and can be made smartly, it can absolutely come back as a stronger company. So, sad to see an icon happen like this. I heard one analyst say, in its heyday, it was like Apple of its time. So certainly tough to see this happen, and we hope they have the best here and have a successful restructuring, come out of bankruptcy soon.
All right, Jane King, live from Wall Street this morning. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll be right back. Much more Kodak coverage and more right here on 13 AM News this morning. Stay with us.
Big news in Rochester, breaking news. This morning, after months of speculation, Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at midnight. Kodak has failed to find a buyer for its 1,100 digital imaging patents and had said in November it could run out of cash within a year if it didn't sell those patents. Kodak's announcement said it has secured $950 million in financing from Citigroup and expects to be able to operate its business normally and will be able to pay employees. Kodak launched a new website overnight that focuses on the reorganization plan. There is information there for employees, investors, customers, and suppliers. You can check it out by going to 13wham.com and clicking on the green Find It button. It's also where you can watch the full statement from CEO Antonio Perez. Our coverage continues all morning long on Rochester CW, including with the head of a retirement group. We're talking about Kodak retirees. Where do we go from here? That's on Rochester CW. Welcome back. It is a Thursday, January 19th, and you can see that's our lead story. But January 19th, the day that a lot of people will remember of another significant date in the history of a 130-year-old company, the day Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Let's get right to Bob Volpe. He is the head of the Eastman Kodak Retirees Association. He's on the phone with us now. Bob, what is your first message for retirees that are waking up with all kinds of questions this morning? What's the first thing you want to say to them?
I think it's important for retirees to be calm and relax and get ready to be prepared. Nothing is going to happen until a bankruptcy decides what will happen with our pensions and benefits. Our pensions and our 401ks are safe. The 401k is retirees' money. The pension is very, very well funded. We do face the risk of losing our health care, but ECRA is prepared to represent retirees in a bankruptcy court to fight for some way to try to work on continuing those in some fashion. It's very highly likely we will, have a negative impact on our health care and lose it, but ECRA is working on some alternatives and will be a part of the unsecured creditors committee in the bankruptcy court to speak for those.
I wonder what you can do or what leverage you have, Bob. A lot of retirees will say, well, if Kodak's going to do what they're going to do, haven't we seen other companies cut these kind of benefits out? Haven't we seen other people affected? And isn't there a precedent? Or what would you tell them? What kind of power do you have to fight this?
We have a very important power in that the Kodak doesn't decide what happens. The bankruptcy judge does. And as a result, we can be at the table to negotiate for options and alternatives that we have, been preparing for some time now. One of the beauties about our organization is that we've existed for several years. Many of the other companies didn't form their retiree committees until they were in the throes of bankruptcy. So they had to scramble and put some things together in an unprepared way, and as a result, missed some windows of opportunity. We've got a lot of resources behind us, not only in terms of a bankruptcy attorney that we've hired out of Syracuse, but one that is the National Retirees Legislative Network, which is an association of over 30 retiree associations that includes Delta pilots, GM, Chrysler, and others that have experienced bankruptcy and are giving us advice on how to manage it going forward.
Hi, Bob. Jennifer here. We know by nature some people are more proactive than others. We know that your group, as you said, has been around for a number of years now. We've seen a lot of people attending seminars at Brighton Securities, but there are probably some retirees who just said, well, I've heard a lot of this before. I know at some point I need to get around to doing something about it. Well, maybe now's the morning they're waking up going, oh my gosh, what do I do today? Any advice for someone who's going, I need to do something, what do I do?
Join ECRA. First of all, let me clarify things. We did not work with Brighton Securities. They did that on their own.
Okay.
But I would suggest the retirees join ECRA. They can do so through our website at www.ekra.org. You can pay your $15 dues through the website, and if you don't use the Internet, you can join by sending a check for $15 payable to ECRA to our post office box 25660, Rochester, New York 14625. It's important for people to understand that we're asking for the $15 to help support the financial needs that we have, but also to effectively confirm that the Kodak retirees want ECRA to represent them. And right now there's no other organization that's poised to do that. So it's important for retirees to recognize we will all be individual creditors to the Eastman Kodak Company, and the judge will look for a body of organization to represent those 25 to 38,000 people, and ECRA will stand up and say, please select us, which is most likely to happen in our estimation.
Bob, we know you're late for me. A couple more quick questions and we'll let you go here. What would you say to the people who would tell you, hey, we want this company to succeed long term, and unfortunately what they put in place is not sustainable, and if they're going to survive, they do need to scale back? What would you say to that?
I don't think there's any question, Evan, that what we're looking at is a reduction in our health care benefits. And so the question becomes, how can we best absorb that loss and let the company succeed? We're looking for win-win outcomes here, and we've got some ideas that we might be able to negotiate that would allow us to do that. Our health care benefits are undoubtedly going to be broken away from the Eastman Kodak company. It's just a matter of how we do that. And those are the options and alternatives that we will be looking for.
And I promised a viewer named Becky, who posted on Facebook, that I would ask you the question she asked that a lot of retirees are asking. She's asking about the benefits, and maybe we could pull up on the screen, guys. She says, will my mother-in-law be able to keep her health insurance and small pension from her husband's 40 years of service? He passed away last year. What would you say?
My mother's in that same category. She's a survivor, and she will probably lose her health care, but she will be able to keep her pension. We will look for alternatives. That's one of the things that ECRA is doing so that she can have some health care at an affordable cost.
Bob Volpe, head of the Kodak Retirees Association. Bob, I know you're busy. We're going to talk to you later today and throughout the week. Thanks for taking some time for us.
Thank you, Jennifer, and Evan, good to be with you.
All right, that's Bob. We've known Bob for years, and a lot of work that they have to do now. A lot of work ahead for them.
He's off to do that now, into a meeting now as we speak. I just want to mention, too, that George Compway from Brighton Securities, who is always so good at putting a lot of this, what can be complicated financial news, into something that we can all understand. He's going to be coming in at 8:30 and joining us.
He's coming in here at 8:30?
Yes.
You're breaking the news to me. That's good to know.
That's why I'm here.
George is really, really good at distilling that, isn't he?
He said one thing to you today that put it into the best terms for you, and that was...
He said this is filing for Chapter 11 is like quadruple bypass. Some people don't survive it, and the people that do generally don't come out feeling like they're going to run marathons. You're a different person, maybe a little slower, your health changes, but you try to survive going forward, and that's kind of what happens to companies. You don't expect it to be the same, and that's a great analogy.
Now's the question, what's happening on State Street? Norma Holland is out there, headquarters, talking to folks as they come in and as they're waking up and going to Kodak today, talking about this news. Norma's going to have a live report coming up, and we're also going to get the latest on our forecast as well.
Well, I'm sitting next to a couple people who have ties to Kodak through family, friends, etc. I think as we all do. And one of two things is going to happen out of today's news that Kodak is filing for Chapter 11. Either this company restructures and finds a way to retool and survive going forward. It may not be the same Kodak we remember, but this will be the day that things finally started moving in a stronger direction. Or this will be the first step leading towards Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is the dissolution of the company.
Yeah, we're done.
And what happens more often? The latter. Usually, it's the company, when you fire Chapter 11, you want to retool, and most companies don't do it successfully. But the bigger ones have been able to do it, some of the bigger ones.
Auto companies recently.
So let's head out now to Norma Holland. Let's get a sense for what the mood is like. You're starting to see some people show up for work today.
Yeah, imagine a lot of people knew this was coming, but waking up and having to go to work.
Yeah, I cannot express to you how bitter cold it is out here. Wow. It's... My mouth is almost frozen. That's how cold it is. So you can only imagine what the people who are coming to work this morning, who must walk and face that bitter Arctic wind, are thinking as they walk into the building this morning. I'm going to step out of the way so we can get a shot of the building. And, you know, when we got here this morning, a lot of the building here, the world headquarters, which Kodak says it will maintain, a lot of these offices were dark. They were dark. And then we started to see the lights come on. And we were just, you know, you can't help but stand down here on the street level, here on State Street, and wonder, what are they thinking this morning? You know, we heard from Kodak CEO Antonio Perez talk about the fact that they will continue to pay their employees their benefits, their vacation, their wages. But what does that mean for the long term? And then, of course, we hear about those retirees who, you know, certainly they have just as much of a vested interest in the success of this company as do the current workers. Well, you know what? We can only imagine what they're thinking this morning, and we've not been able to talk to any of them just yet because, quite frankly, they don't want to talk to us. We have heard from Kodak employees, though, guys. You remember recently Evan White spoke to a Kodak employee who says, look, throughout the years, he has 30-some years with this company. He says, you know what, we've been laid off before. And then we're hired back. But he says morale is as low as it's ever been. And so the employees were wondering, what does this mean? What do? We have to keep coming to work every day. Well, now the CEO is saying, yes, business as usual. We will continue to service our customers. We will continue to work on a daily basis to try and be profitable. But they're working with $950 million from Citigroup, which is financing this bankruptcy. And, that means they say that they have enough money to operate during the bankruptcy, and they expect to come out of this, Evan, as you said, a leaner company in 2013. But will that mean more layoffs? Will that mean a sort of another round of layoffs for the company? Those are the questions that have yet to be answered. And so, like I said, it's bitter cold out here. And when you come in, when you watch these people when they're going into the building, you're thinking, wow, what a tough day for them. More than 130 years after the company was formed by George Eastman. So again, this is quite an assignment, I really have to tell you. And another thing, too, talk about the size of this story. This is a story with worldwide interest. This morning I met with Karen Magnuson. She's the VP of News, and she actually handed me 2 copies of today's newspaper, which, do you guys have a copy up there on the set?
No, we do not.
Okay, I have a copy, but of course not on me, right? It's a new edition. They had to stop the presses last night and reprint a new front page that basically talked about this, because this happened just after midnight. They had to stop the presses, reprint a new front page. So you can only imagine that those newspapers are going to be sort of a collector's edition of this day, which, again, bitter cold, and very just a cold news for the employees, and what this means for them, we don't know. We're still waiting to find out. Hopefully we're going to get a chance to talk to some of these employees later on this morning.
That's what I wanted to ask you. It's not a fun job what you're doing, not just the cold, but it's going up to someone and saying, hey, you just heard really bad news about your potential future. Do you have a comment? And lots of times they don't want to see us and they don't want to talk to us. So I'm assuming you haven't been able to speak to anyone yet this morning. They're just not interested at this point.
No, they're not interested in talking to me. That's the whole point. That's what I meant by we are, we've tried to reach out to some of them. They're not interested in talking. We're going to keep trying, because that's what I do. That's my job. And I'm going to keep trying to get some of these people to talk to me. But can you blame them if they don't want to say anything? I don't think, a reasonable person could. They may be concerned about even keeping their job. Well, let's face it. This is a tough economic times. These are tough economic times, and people need to keep their jobs. So we're going to keep doing what we can here on the street, and we'll let you guys know as the morning progresses.
All right, Norma Holland reporting live for us on State Street on a historic morning. Right back with much more coverage. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We are continuing our coverage of news that Kodak has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and brought in someone who is so good at taking what's often confusing financial information and making it easier for all of us to understand.
Yeah, no pressure, George. We've been telling people there's none better at summing this up succinctly, and I want to start with something that if our viewers missed the conversation with you earlier this morning, you compared Kodak's filing for Chapter 11 to someone going in for quadruple bypass surgery. And why? I want you to explain that analogy and why you think it fits.
Okay. The good news about quadruple bypass surgery is you're not dead, right? But you've got problems, and they're serious problems. You go in, you have that surgery, it's serious surgery. And when you come out of surgery, you're not the same person. Upstairs, you're the same, maybe, but you weigh less, and you do less. You're not going to run marathons. You're not going to be out there skiing. Maybe you're on a regimen of pharmaceuticals. Your life changes after such a serious medical incident. That's what's going to be true of Kodak. The fact that they'll come out the other side, they'll still exist, I'm encouraged that they will. The fact that somebody should be excited about that, I'm not so sure.
Well, and he's referring to, and we were just talking about the fact that CEO Antonio Perez, in his video statement overnight, used the language saying, we're excited to get started. He said, wrong language?
I think that Mr. Perez's excitement about bankruptcy is maybe a little misplaced. It is the job of senior management to be enthusiastic. That's great. But the idea that investors and people in Rochester can see what's happening on the ground, and that differs so much from what they're hearing upstairs at State Street, means credibility at senior management levels has been lost with the public and with investors.
He said also to expect business as usual today. Obviously, there's a level of anxiety through our community, but as far as day-to-day actual dealings of the company, will that stay the same, you think?
On two levels, Jennifer. The idea that people show up for work, the idea that they do their regular job, the idea that they get paid for what they're doing, absolutely business as usual. The idea that most of your employees, their heads are about to explode, that's not quite business as usual. But yeah, the company's going to operate, make products, sell them. That's the good news.
I guess one of the fear, we're talking about, it coming out as a leaner company. We haven't heard any word today of layoffs. But if we're talking about making it a leaner company, I imagine different divisions might be sold to other companies. And if you've made your home here, could there be families looking at, if I want to keep my current job, I might have to move to whatever company might buy me whenever?
Sure. There probably will be some layoffs. There will be some business unit sales if they can find buyers, and they probably can. Of course, they just reorganized into commercial and consumer. We think the consumer unit is pretty much up for sale, but there is maybe a silver lining for some of those employees. If you look at businesses that have been sold off or spun off to ITT Geospatial, to Johnson & Johnson, to Carestream, or others, in most cases, the new owner, it's kind of like a house. Got a house you want to sell, you don't have the money to fix it up, it's kind of run down, you don't have time, you sell it. The new owner of that house, even if it's run down, wants to paint it, wants new carpet, wants to fix it up. And the employees who left Kodak to work for these other companies, at first they were worried. In the end, they're better off working for these companies because they've invested in those businesses when Kodak either couldn't or wouldn't.
Now, I want to make sure we explain for our viewers, a lot of people are waking up hearing bankruptcy. Chapter 11 tends to come, actually, forget the numbers, before Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is sort of the liquidation. That's kind of the end game. Chapter 11 is the effort to restructure. The company stays in control. And is it good for a company? You don't want to get to that point, but it does offer a chance to survive. Now, George, I read that maybe 1 in 20 companies that filed for Chapter 11 are able to come out of it on the other side stronger, leaner, and go forward. But a lot of the companies that fail are smaller.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? What do you see here with the size of Kodak and their chances?
My guess is that Kodak will have no problem emerging from bankruptcy. We do think the bankruptcy process will take about 18 months, a year to 2 for a company this size. But let's not forget one thing. Despite all the dire news, Kodak is going to sell $5 billion worth of stuff this year. Movie film, printer units, inkjets, all that. $5 billion. And even if they lop some of that off or shut it down, there's going to be a core of $3 billion worth of annual sales that will come out the other end.
He also, in his video, was talking about, we had a global recession. That did not help our company. Also, he's been talking about all these lawsuits that Kodak has. Most recently, we heard about the one with Samsung yesterday. And I know a lot of these lawsuits, they don't move quickly. But millions and billions of dollars are at stake. Are any of these going to come through soon, and might that help and really give a substantial boost to the company?
Jennifer, I think they'll come through soon, but in a different way than we think.
Okay.
These lawsuits, the recent lawsuits against HTC and Samsung and what have you, it would be great if they would result in a damage award that Kodak could earn. More likely, however, what they're trying to do with these lawsuits is bolster the value of their patent portfolio. Okay. All a patent is a list of claims. And if you've got claims and you want to show everybody that you're serious about them and if the claims are strong, sue everybody in sight, you're going to put those patents up for sale very soon. And the stronger your patents are and the stronger you can defend those patents, the greater likelihood you'll get more in a sale. So I'm not sure the lawsuits are designed to get quick cash, but they are designed to strengthen the value when they go to sell those patents.
And if we could talk a little bit about the stock price, it's going to open at 55 cents a share. And sometimes prognostication can help move the market. You don't want to spook people or spook the market, but at the same time, you got to be realistic. You've seen companies go through this before, and what you wrote on Twitter this morning was caveat emptor.
Caveat emptor.
Why do you say that?
Buyer beware. I think the stock will not open at 55. I think it will open lower today. The strong likelihood is the shares will become worthless at the end of bankruptcy. But that's a year or 2 from now. You're going to see the shares trade today, and they'll trade cheap. And during the bankruptcy process, the shares might go up or down. But share prices are not set by Kodak or some agency. Share prices are set by what people are willing to pay, their hopes, dreams, fears. So speculators will be in there. But in most bankruptcies, more than your 1 in 5, or more than 80%, I should say, most bankruptcies end up common stockholder gets nothing.
Oh. Speaking of what you get out at the end of this, I know you, through your company, Brighton Securities, have been meeting with a lot of the retirees, preparing them for this moment. Sure. Does anything change from what you said yesterday before this actually happened to today's news?
Yeah, last night we did have about the 6th in our series of retiree employee meetings. Nothing changes other than we're there. What we were telling folks last night is we expect, if bankruptcy is filed, this and this and this will happen. We expect pensions to be safe. We expect the 401k plan to be safe. We expect health benefits to be safe at least through the end of bankruptcy. Okay. Thereafter, probably gone, but bankruptcy is going to take a year or more. So there won't be any immediate change. The good news for employees and retirees is you don't have to make any sudden moves.
So bottom line, we may see Kodak, and you seem to expect to see Kodak to be one of the companies that survives Chapter 11 just in a very different form. We got to change your expectations.
I expect to see them survive, and as a Rochesterian all my life, I hope to see them survive.
I appreciate that, and you know, we like to say on this broadcast that we got people in this community who help us understand. George always, and not only do you answer the call, but George is not one of these guys who says, make sure my company name is blasted. So I'm just going to say this. Brighton Securities, thank you very much. Where can people contact you?
We have a Kodak hotline for retirees or employees. Ringing off the hook. If it's busy, please call back. 585-340-2246. We have another info meeting tomorrow night, and next Friday, in conjunction with Senator Joe Robach's office, we'll be holding a meeting in Greece because of so much demand.
You write that number down. We'll put it on our social media sites as well and let people know it's out there.
Thanks.
And thanks for your. I'm sure our other reporters will probably be hounding you all day, George.
Love to speak with you.
Thank you very much.
Put you on the payroll.
George Conboy from Brighton Securities. Marty's full forecast coming up next, and much more to share with you regarding Kodak, answering more of your questions. Stay with us. And we continue our coverage of Kodak filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. You're looking outside Kodak headquarters on State Street live. A morning of change. Reaction next.
Breaking news alerts and your Weather Authority forecast with Doug Imblage, Norma Holland, Evan Dawson, Jennifer Johnson, and meteorologist Marty Snyder. This is 13 Wham News on Rochester's CW in high definition.
Welcome back. Before you bring up to speed on the latest on Kodak, let's bring you a quick check of the forecast today. It's going to be a cold one out there, waking up to 18, going up to 32 by the afternoon with a chance of some snow later this afternoon.
Norma Holland and Terry Hancock have been leading our coverage from State Street on the news on Kodak's bankruptcy filing this morning, and they are out there after having spoken to some employees. Norma, what's the latest?
Yeah, good morning, Evan. This morning, very early, just after 6 o'clock, we started to see the first employees sort of start trickle into the building. And as you can imagine, they didn't want to talk to us right away. But then we started to catch up with those who came a little later in the morning, after perhaps some of the news had begun to sort of sink in and they had a chance to think about it. We saw and met 2 employees who were very candid about their thoughts on today's news that Kodak is filing for bankruptcy. Take a listen.
Couldn't be any sadder. It could not be any sadder. 33 years with Kodak, it's heartbreaking. It really is. You kind of saw it coming, but when it hits, it's sad, you know?
Well, can't be a surprise, really. I mean, it's been in the news for so long, and, you know, I was born and raised in Rochester and Gates, and all my friends have worked at Kodak, and I've been here for 15 years, so it's depressing.
It's depressing. That's what you heard the gentleman there say, and that's the sentiment being shared by everyone. It's just a sad day for this company. And even though there are many who want to look on the bright side and say, well, in 18 months, this company could reemerge a stronger, a leaner, more profitable company, for them, they see this as, well, the end of an era for them. The first gentleman we spoke to there, Jay, he says, I've been with this company for, 30 years. He actually came here today, business as usual for him. He was coming here to State Street for a meeting. When he walked in, he walked right out. I said, what happened? He said, well, the meeting's been canceled, so I'm going back to my offices to work. He said, but I'm just going to keep doing what I have to do. I asked him, do you have an 18-month plan? Kodak says it expects to emerge from this with that loan from Citigroup in 18 months. And I said, do you have an 18-month plan? He says, well, I've been meeting with my financial planner, and I'm close to retirement, so I have a plan. But he didn't want to go into specifics, and I think that's what you're finding with a lot of people is they're trying to figure out what's next. I'm going to come to work. The Kodak says it will pay its employees. It will continue to pay for their vacation, for their health care, for their wages. But what's next? What's their 18-month plan? That's what a lot of people here are trying to figure out today. Reporting live at Kodak World Headquarters, Norma Holland, 13 WHAM News.
Norma, thank you. Not an easy job. We've been out there before when we were talking about layoffs, not specifically talking about that today, but when you talk about a company and its changes, and it's scary for a lot of people, not an easy job that she had to do this morning.
There have been companies, especially in recent years, that have gone through Chapter 11 that you have heard of that have come out stronger, and Kodak is going to hope to follow in the footsteps of companies like Delta, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Delphi. There are others we could tell you about. There are some differences with these companies. Kodak now is not quite as large as most of those companies, but Kodak's still a big company, and the larger the company, the more likely you are to emerge from Chapter 11 and at least survive. A lot of smaller companies do not survive. We know that, and but Kodak is kind of hoping to find a way to become a new and leaner kind of company. We're going to find out in the coming months about potential job cuts. We don't know, especially locally, but a lot of questions there.
A lot of resources for you as well. You see the CEO right there, Antonio Perez. He released a statement just after midnight with news that the company was filing. You can check out that full statement at 13wham.com. Just go to the green Find It button. Also, we put on our Facebook pages the Brighton Securities Kodak hotline. We hear that number is being flooded right now, so if you can't get through the first time, maybe try a few other times. Also, the Kodak Retirees Association, we put a website for that on our Facebook page as well. Just trying to get you all the information to hopefully ease some of the confusion out there, and I'm sure what's a scary time for a lot of people.
We'll be right back.
Board and management team, after consulting with our advisors, decided the filing for reorganization, while a very difficult decision, was the right decision to make at this time.
Around the world, but is felt most here in Rochester, where CEO Antonio Perez says it will be business as usual for employees who should count on getting paid, getting health coverage, and getting vacation. The goal, he says, is to get out of bankruptcy, a leaner company, 18 months from now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this midday. I'm Jennifer Johnson. We knew this could happen, and it did early this morning. That is when Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Well, not surprising. The actual filing is pretty emotional for a lot of people here in our area, emotions ranging from sadness to uncertainty. We start our team coverage now with 13 WHAM's Norma Holland. You're on Kodak State Street, where you spoke with some current employees this morning.
Yeah, on this bitter cold day, bitter news from Eastman Kodak. The news broke just after midnight, as you said, but it wasn't entirely a surprise to the thousands of employees who still depend on Kodak for their livelihood. Now, Eastman Kodak says it has secured a $950 million loan in financing from Citigroup and expects to be able to operate its business during this reorganization. So, most importantly, it means it will be able to pay its employees their wages and service its customers. Kodak says it expects this reorganization will take about 18 months. CEO Antonio Perez says it will be business as usual during this time. That includes selling its assets, which include more than 1,000 digital imaging patents. As the company attempts to be hopeful during this period, employees say they can't help but feel like the next 18 months are going to be long ones. Do you have a plan for here on out? Kodak says 18 months, they figure they'll come out of this. Do you have a plan for the next 18 months?
Yes.
What is it?
Can't share. I have a strategy. I'm retirement eligible. I think I'll be okay. I've been talking to a financial planner who I've known for a long time and trust, and I think I'm okay.
It can't be a surprise, really. I mean, it's been in the news for so long, and You know, I was born and raised in Rochester and Gates, and all my friends have worked at Kodak, and I've been here for 15 years, so it's depressing.
It's depressing. That's the sentiment shared by everyone I spoke to today. As you can imagine, a lot of people have questions about this, and Kodak anticipated that. It created a new website. It launched it last night. It's called Kodak Transforms. You can find a link to it by going to 13wham.com and clicking on the green Find It button. Reporting live downtown at Kodak World Headquarters, Norma Holland, 13 Wham News.
Norma, thank you. The story from current employees. Of course, the bankruptcy filing impacts thousands of people who no longer work for the company. About half of Kodak's 38,000 retirees still live in the Rochester area, and many have concerns about pensions and health benefits.
Our pensions and our 401ks are safe. The 401k is retirees' money. The pension is very, very well funded.
That was Bob Volpe, president of Eastman Kodak's Retirees Association. Under labor laws, creditors cannot go after pensions, cash, and 401ks. Healthcare benefits are less secure, but can be reduced only under the supervision of a bankruptcy judge. Rochester's mayor says while news of today's filing has been rumored and even expected for some time now, he was still shocked to hear the actual words. Tom Richards says he understands the uncertainty and angst that Kodak workers and retirees are feeling today.
I think we can't look at Kodak as just the business. We have to look at Kodak as it's had its impact on this community, and much of what it did for this community remains. And it remains as our strength. So that's something to be thankful for.
Richards also adds, quote, "We're not dependent on Kodak. We haven't been for some time, but it will have an impact on how people see us." Richards says he wishes Kodak well in its effort to rebuild and return to solvency. All right, Kodak's future will be determined by whether the company survives Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which, hey, if you look on the bright side, it's not Chapter 7. What's the difference? Evan Dawson here now to sort out what is happening now.
Yeah, that's right, Jennifer. Forget the numbers. Chapter 11 bankruptcy happens first. In Chapter 7, it's over. The company's liquidated, essentially taken apart. Chapter 11, though, is all about trying to restructure and rebuild with the hopes of becoming profitable again. Kodak will spend the next year and a half trying to do exactly that. For most companies that survive Chapter 11, that means layoffs of some kind, and it means scaling down the business operation. For Kodak, it's the only way to survive. Now, the CEO, as you saw earlier, released a video saying that this is actually an exciting time for the company. Those were his words in that video, which you can now watch at 13wham.com. It's about 6.5 minutes long. Antonio Perez saying everyone at the company is, quote, excited. That prompted George Conboy of Brighton Securities. Well, let's listen to their words on it.
We are all excited about our future. We will now be well positioned to complete our transformation and write the next chapter in the history of the world's leading material science and imaging company for the digital age.
Well, I think that it would be fair to call Antonio Perez the most tone-deaf CEO in America. It's not a reflection on his abilities. I don't know the man. But if you look at what we've heard from the top floors at 343 State Street and contrast that over-optimism about the future with what we're actually seeing, what people in Rochester are seeing, what investors are seeing, there's a big disconnect.
Now, that's George Conboy of Brighton Securities. He says Kodak would have more credibility on Wall Street if, in his words, Antonio Perez spoke more realistically about what's going on. All of that being said, though, Conboy does expect Kodak to be one of those rare companies that goes through Chapter 11 bankruptcy and does survive. He thinks they'll be a smaller company, but a warning to shareholders. He says caveat emptor, especially when it comes to the stock. 55 cents when it opened this morning. He believes it could be worthless 18 months from now. Reporting live, Evan Dawson, 13 Wham News.
Well, Evan, thanks. Let's take a look now at where it stands as we speak at this hour. Kodak stock is at 36 cents. That is down 19 cents. And we'll have much more on this story all throughout the day. In fact, we have a special section at 13wham.com. And our team coverage continues tonight at 5, 6, 10, and 11.
Next, Kodak files for bankruptcy.
Oh my God, what happened to the company? I mean, it really is very, very sad.
What's next for workers, retirees, and the company?
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News at 5, now in high definition.
What everyone should expect from Kodak is business as usual.
But there is nothing usual about the events of this day. Kodak has filed for bankruptcy.
I live in Rochester all my life, and it's been the yellow box to us all our life.
Sure has been. The CEO of Kodak today is stressing that filing for bankruptcy is a good thing. Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Ryan.
And I'm Doug Embledge. The company so many think of when they think of Rochester announced the filing just after midnight. The company will work under a financing agreement made with Citigroup. Kodak says it will continue to operate as normal. No layoffs were announced with today's filing. CEO Antonio Perez says the filing is an exciting time as Kodak plans for its future.
We're taking this step at this point in our transformation in order to build the strongest possible foundation for the Kodak of the future.
7,000 people still work for Kodak here. No longer our largest employer, but still a significant player. For current employees, today's bankruptcy news carries its own significance. 13 Wham's Alexis Arnold has reaction from some of those employees. She is live now from the Eastman Business Park.
Well, Jenny, for the most part, employees at Kodak are staying loyal, and they say they are optimistic. It was work as usual for many Kodak employees, as many did get this news this morning on their way into work. Many say the writing was on the wall. Kodak's financial state has been in the news for a while, but for those with strong ties, especially employees, they say this news hurts.
Couldn't be any sadder. It could not be any sadder. 33 years with Kodak, it's heartbreaking. It really is. You kind of saw it coming, but when it hits, it's sad.
And I've been here for 15 years, so it's depressing. I mean, more because, you know, they're such a part of the community and have been for so many hundreds, you know, over 100 years, that it's not just as much Kodak in trouble, but it's kind of like watching your favorite football team lose in the playoffs. If I'm going to worry about what I'm doing 18 months from now, I'm not going to really accomplish the things I need to do today. So I'll just take each day as it comes and come to work and try my hardest every day.
Now, while this may be a tough time for many employees, those in the community, I spoke to a group earlier today who says that the workers at Kodak are a strong group of individuals. They are behind their company 100%, and they are confident that they will make it through this and emerge stronger than ever. Only time can tell. Reporting live in Rochester, Alexis Arnold, 13 Wham News.
And so many stories we'll be telling today. These bankruptcy rumors lingered for months, and that kept Kodak retirees on edge. This filing does remove some of their uncertainty, as the company is finally saying at least something about how retirees could be affected. 13 Wham's Angela Hong is joining us now with some details on what they're facing today. Angela?
Doug, the retirees I spoke to today say they have nearly had virtually no contact with Kodak for the last couple of months. But today, Kodak answered some questions on their new website, Kodak Transforms, and they say that they're sending letters out to all retirees. Today, the company said that 401k benefits would not be affected. Pensions also seem to be safe. One big change, payments for retirees receiving supplemental pension benefits are discontinued as of today. Health insurance benefits are not affected by the bankruptcy filing for now, but the company says this could change. Now, many retirees have started looking at other health benefit options just in case Kodak decides to drop it. They are disappointed with the company because they feel that they didn't contact them earlier.
Retirement might have to temporarily end and might have to go back to work temporarily.
Get to the point. Good news, bad news, share it with us. We're all grown-ups in today's society, and it's very important that we know.
Now, each retiree situation is very different, and there's a lot of specific information out there, so we encourage you to go to 13WAM.com and click on the green Find It button. There you can find a link to Kodak's new website, to Kodak Transforms, and also you can find numbers for hotlines. You can call those numbers to find out more information about how you are affected as a retiree. Live at Kodak World Headquarters, Angela Hong, 13 WAM News.
You know, I'm not sure how many of those retirees that we're hearing from are still stockholders, but if they are, they cannot trade those shares today. Trading was halted this morning, and the company has been delisted from the New York Stock Exchange, at least for now.
Well, you know, filing for bankruptcy of any kind used to be a sign of a company's demise. But in the past decade, companies have used Chapter 11 to get rid of debt and become viable. 13 WAM's Evan Dawson explains the different forms of bankruptcy and why it could revive Eastman Kodak.
Think of bankruptcy this way. Your company is a big SUV. Now, if you're going to file for Chapter 7, it's over. You're going to strip it down for parts, melt off the rest, no more vehicle. That's not what Kodak is doing, though. Kodak is trying to take their big SUV and file for Chapter 11, which means they're trying to get a smaller car out of the deal. They're trying to get something more efficient, a little leaner, and certainly something less expensive. Now, if it works and they go through the 18-month process, yeah, it's not as nice a vehicle, but at least just something that you can drive. If it doesn't work, well, you can still go back to Chapter 7 and strip it down for parts.
It always could be worse. And in the case of Kodak, it could be liquidation, it could be collapse, it could be shutdown. It's none of those things. Reorganization means Kodak will endure. They'll be smaller, they may be weaker, but they'll be here.
Large companies have a mixed record with Chapter 11. Most major airlines have successfully slimmed down through Chapter 11 in the past decade. Delta, American, Southwest among them. But it almost never works without layoffs of some kind. Whether Kodak will lay off Rochester-based workers remains to be seen, but history says Kodak will have to get smaller before it becomes profitable again. By filing for Chapter 11, Kodak is allowed to remain in control of the company. So when they say that nothing changes on a day-to-day basis for customers and workers, they are right. But the stock has already been delisted, and even though you can still buy Kodak stock, analysts warn it could become worthless over the next 18 months. Evan Dawson, 13 WAM News.
Our team coverage of Kodak's bankruptcy filing continues throughout this broadcast. Coming up in about 5 minutes, life after Kodak, what it's meant for some employees. At 5:30, remembering Kodak as it was. Working at Kodak, a rite of passage for many area families, and reaction from local leaders on the bankruptcy filing. And then at 5:40, the future of Eastman Business Park, with employees working at what was known for years as Kodak Park. And then at 5:50, a look at how we got here from George Eastman's innovation to a possible scenario of liquidation. And join us tonight at 7 o'clock for our half-hour special on Kodak's filing for bankruptcy. Kodak's reorganization will likely impact some of the nearly 7,000 people employed with the company here in Rochester. Yet a shrinking Kodak has led to an explosion of small companies responsible for creating jobs here. 13 WAM's Jane Flash joins us now in the newsroom with more on what that means. Jane?
Well, Ginny, there are 23,000 small businesses in Rochester. They are responsible for creating virtually every new private sector job since the recession that followed the September 11th terrorist attacks. Now, dozens of those companies have been started by people who were once laid off at Kodak. Rochester Precision Optical not only uses Kodak technology to make lenses, it makes them on the very same machines that used to belong to Kodak's optical imaging systems business. 6 years ago, this company opened shop by acquiring that equipment and 27 laid off Kodak workers. It now employs nearly 200 and is expanding.
Really the best thing is not so much even the technology or the equipment, but just the folks that we work with. I mean, we're almost like a family. So many of the same people came over here.
We're very excited to be able to finally prove what we could do and have somebody stand behind us and help us prove what we can do.
Now, Rochester Precision Optics is undergoing an $11 million expansion and hiring again on a day filled with tough news. This company serves as a reminder of the success of dozens of small businesses spun off either directly or indirectly from Kodak. In the newsroom, Jane Flash, 13 WAM News.
Yeah, Jane, the new engines of our economy, that's for sure. News of Kodak's bankruptcy did bring back memories for a lot of us today. Some of those memories you can read on 13 Wham's Facebook page. Kelly says she had several relatives who worked at Kodak. She wrote, "It is tough to even think about the fact that they are not Rochester's biggest employer anymore. Hasn't been in years, really." Michelle reflected on the times when the Kodak bonuses were handed out. Remember that in March, that day? She added, "I remember how all the stores would have Kodak bonus sales to draw on the business. As a kid, I felt like it was Christmas for the adults." To share your memories, head to 13wham.com. We have a link to our Facebook page on the front page. Your Kodak connections?
A neighbor worked at Kodak, and he used to take all the neighborhood kids to the Kodak movie matinees.
At the theater on
Yeah,
the Ridge,
and that was a blast. Boy, you felt like, you know, you were really living high.
And I had two uncles who worked at Kodak, one an engineer, one a tech rep, and then, the next door neighbor was an engineer at Kodak, too.
Everybody knew somebody who worked at Kodak. Still do, really. And still ahead, Kodak's history in what else but pictures.
Also ahead, a look at the HD Wham Cam. There you see it. Chief Meteorologist Glenn Johnson watching some snow to the west of us. Find out when it might get here.
13 Wham News wants to tell your stories, your concerns, your ideas, the things that matter most to you. Help us tell your stories. Email us at yourstories@13wham.com. This is your news. These are your stories.
Next, Kodak's bankruptcy. Why the CEO of Kodak says there's reason for optimism and remembering the Kodak that was.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News at 5:30, now in high definition.
While a very difficult decision, was the right decision to make at this time.
Kodak files for bankruptcy. Not a surprise, still a jolt.
It was like, oh, you worked at Kodak, period.
Kodak says it hopes to boost its cash position to stay in business.
The company warned in November that it could run out of cash in a year if it didn't sell some of its 1,100 patents. Kodak says it secured $950 million in financing from Citigroup. The company plans to operate as normal and pay employees during its bankruptcy reorganization.
We are all excited about our future. We will now be well positioned to complete our transformation and write the next chapter in the history of the world's leading material science and imaging company for the digital age.
For workers, retirees, people who grew up in Kodak families, there is sadness, of course, today. There's also some fear about the future. We all know someone who worked at Kodak. For some families, it's generational. For some, Kodak was family and a place you worked until you retired. 13 Wham's Patrice Walsh has some of those same memories, and she has been talking to other families as well today. Hey, Patrice.
You know, Doug, we've said this so many times. Everybody knows somebody that worked at Kodak. I know my dad was there 40 years. We heard news of Kodak's bankruptcy today. Many of us thought, you know, this isn't what we remember. It's not the way things used to be.
We were a Kodak neighborhood.
Debbie Goyette remembers growing up in what she called a Kodak neighborhood.
Going up and down the street, thinking of families. Very few did not work at Kodak.
There were 7 children in the Carr family, a lot of mouths to feed, but it wasn't a problem. Her father, James Carr, worked at Kodak.
He was really set for life.
Carr worked in the chemical division, or as he would jokingly tell his children, the dope room. He loved his job and knew it was his for life.
He loved it, and he was definitely very, very proud and very grateful to be working at Kodak.
There wasn't a camera or box of film in the house that didn't have the Kodak name on it. That's just the way it was.
It was like, oh, you worked at Kodak, period.
Carr retired in December of 1985. A month later, thousands of his co-workers and friends were laid off. His son James and 2 daughters also worked at Kodak. But unlike their father, their jobs were not for life. It wasn't the same anymore.
Things fell apart.
James Carr passed away in May, but his daughter says she'll always treasure his Kodak memories.
His stories of Kodak, his love of Kodak, his friends at Kodak.
And you know, many of the families that we talked with today shared their memories, and they said, you know, maybe it is true, maybe Kodak should have made changes sooner, maybe things were too good for too long, but you know what? They did not have anything negative to say, only wishing the company well. They hope this move helps Kodak rebuild and survive in Rochester. Reporting live on State Street, Patrice Walsh, 13 Web News.
Thank you, Patrice. I think you really captured the Kodak that was. Local leaders say Rochester will rebound if Kodak is further downsized. The area already has absorbed the loss of more than 50,000 Kodak jobs over the last few decades. 13 Wham's Rachel Barnhart has more from the mayor and others.
Well, Jenny, local leaders say Kodak's bankruptcy filing is significant but largely symbolic, as the company has been declining for some time. No one was surprised Kodak filed for bankruptcy, but it still came as a blow.
I didn't want it to happen. I'm sorry that it happened. I'm certainly sorry for the impact it's going to have on some people. But in terms of the community, we'll get through it. And what we need to do is to keep doing the things we've already been doing.
The lieutenant governor got a call from the CEO and said he heard the stress in his voice.
I have a sense that Antonio and his team are going to work very hard to keep what they have and try and get the strong bones of that company going again. And our job is to help any way that we can.
Kodak has shed thousands of jobs as it struggled to make the transition from film to digital. Yet Rochester's leading the state in job growth as many of those workers landed elsewhere.
We have positioned ourselves as a community to overcome issues like this in corporate America, specifically Kodak. We've already overcome some of the challenges that go along with the Kodak downsizing.
But Kodak still has 7,000 workers and owns 84 parcels that generate several $1 million a year in property taxes for the city. The question now is how much of the company will remain. U of R President Joel Seligman sits on Kodak's board.
As a member of the board, I'm looking forward to working to protect the enterprise, including its employees, including its retirees, and to give the company a future. At the same time, bankruptcy reorganization is a deeply saddening event.
In its bankruptcy filing, Kodak blamed a number of factors, including market forces, the cost of worker benefits, companies infringing on its patents, and even the media. Kodak did make a special point in its filing of saying that it has a deep connection to Rochester, and it's mindful of that connection and its responsibility to employees and retirees. Reporting live on State Street, Rachel Barnhart, 13 Wham News.
All right, Rachel, thank you. The New York Stock Exchange suspended trading of Kodak shares this morning. The company's stock is now delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. When trading was stopped, Kodak stock was at 36 cents a share. Here's the rest of the news from Wall Street today in terms of the markets. The Dow was up 46 points, the NASDAQ up 18, and the S&P 500 climbed about 6.5 today.
And Don's here now with more on what's coming up at 6.
Guess what we'll be talking about?
Kodak maybe?
At 6, yeah, more of our continuing coverage, of course, of today's top story. Eastman Kodak, of course, filing for the Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. We're going to take a look, continuing look at what it means for employees, retirees, investors, and the community. Also, that coverage is going to continue this evening at 7 o'clock. We have a special 13 Wham News special report, the Kodak bankruptcy. We'll all be here. Paul DePascal, our chief photographer, shared this with me today. When I started here at Channel 13, this is what they handed me.
Yeah.
2 rolls of Kodak film. And we shot all of our news stories on film. This is actually the color. We started with black and white film, but we've come a long ways, and Kodak has been a big part of whatever we have done over the years here. 50 years for us this year for Channel 13, and we look back and share some of those Kodak moments.
You really ought to get that developed.
I know.
See what's on there.
I don't know. We may not want to know. Probably some guy with dark hair, you know.
That we want to see.
That would be. All right, thank you, Don.
Still ahead, how Apple is taking textbooks to the next level.
And some more reaction from workers here at the Eastman Business Park, about half of which work for other companies leasing space here, many of them former Kodak workers. I'm Sean Carroll. You'll hear from them coming up.
13 Wham News, brought to you by Water Furnace.
Bankruptcy for Kodak will lead to a transformation not yet known. Transformations for the company are not unprecedented. What we knew as Kodak Park has become a 21st century clean tech facility now called Eastman Business Park. 13 Wham's Sean Carroll joins me now live from the park with more on its future. Sean?
Ginny, I'm standing here in front of the old entrance. That's George Eastman, a memorial to George Eastman where his ashes are buried behind me. And about 100 yards behind that, a humble 3-story brick building where he used to have an office. In the basement, a vault dating back to the days when Kodak workers were paid in cash. Of course, today, his park is nothing like the days when tens of thousands of Kodak workers would be seen streaming through these gates. Now it's home to just 6,200 workers. Only about half actually work for Kodak. Many others work for companies like Sirion Enterprises, made up primarily of former Kodak workers. This company leases space in Building 35 and is developing its own innovative products. Today was a bittersweet day for those workers who spent decades with Kodak and are now witnessing its decline while still working in this park.
So many friends there, so many people you meet throughout your career, and you want nothing but the best for them and the company. It's not a happy day by any means, but you just have to hope for the best and know that their management and everybody's going to pull through, and the workers, because they're so resilient to this now. I think they're going to pull out of it, and they're going to be successful.
Between 2003 and 2007, Kodak actually invested about $200 million as part of this transformation of this park to really attract new businesses here and make it a facility ready for new businesses. Chapter 11 filing spells a possible sale to this park. Nobody knows for sure, of course. Coming up tonight at 6, however, one source tells me there's actually already interest in this park and one possible suitor is already at the table. Until then, live at Kodak Park, Sean Carroll, 13. Wham News.
Thank you, Sean. It reminds a lot of us what happened at Kodak Elm Grove, too. After it
Right.
shut down, it became a business park. Coming up, how we got to here, Kodak through the years, and a look at the company's rise, and, well, it's right up to its bankruptcy filing today.
But first, the view from the HD Wham Cam. Some snow falling. Chief Meteorologist Glenn Johnson's got the Weather Authority forecast.
Wham News in high definition. Makeup provided by Mac.
We have spent most of this hour covering the Kodak news of this day, the bankruptcy filing, and looking ahead at what it will mean. For a moment now, we're going to look back at how this Kodak moment came to be. George Eastman and Steve Jobs, both visionaries who saw a way to take technology to the people and make them want it. Eastman's company became so successful the U.S. government put shackles on it in the early 1900s, restrictions on its trinity of cameras, film, and developing to keep Kodak from monopolizing the market. Kodak almost did anyway.
Eastman Kodak Company.
Kodak survived the death of Eastman and the Depression, and for decades to come, rode the profits from film, a consumable that kept the cash flowing. In the 1970s came the first hint of future trouble, electronic picture taking. But most Kodakers saw Fuji as the enemy, not some far-flung technology that would push film out of the picture-taking picture. In the early 80s, the layoffs started, often thousands being cut at a time. Kodak would get into and out of making copiers. It lost a legal battle over instant photography, and it spun off its chemical division, which, by the way, is thriving today in Tennessee.
The shadows of misty yesteryear.
Some blame Kodak management for not getting out in front of the digital revolution, but even if management had seen all of this coming, Kodak would have needed a leaner and meaner profile to survive. And that's how it's a discussion. There are so many armchair CEOs, in this, and they all have great thoughts on all this. But the fact of the matter is, it's a conglomeration of so many things. And when I talked to Paul Allen, the former spokesman, a few weeks ago, he says Kodak got here with 1,000 little cuts, little mistakes.
And it's been happening over years. It wasn't just one thing. If people ask us today, it's impossible to answer that in a sentence. But you did a nice job looking back.
And now the question is, what happens going forward? And I think none of us really know the answer to that. We're going to find out in the months to come.
We'll continue to follow it. Coming up next, how Apple is reinventing the textbook.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News at 6.
We're taking this step at this point in our transformation in order to build the strongest possible foundation for the Kodak of the future.
And sad day for the pillar of the Rochester community. The Eastman Kodak Company files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Good evening. My wife worked there. A brother-in-law on each side of our families retired from there. My niece still works there. Yes, like me, you most likely have a tie to Eastman Kodak. The children of my generation grew up in this Kodak town, get a job there, and you were set for life. This adjustment hits each and every one of us, and the history of our community tells us we will survive it. But until we do, there are questions to be answered, and we hope to answer many of them in the next half hour. First, a look at the terms. The company secured $950 million in financing from Citigroup and expects to be able to operate its business. That means paying its employees and serving its customers. Kodak expects this reorganization will take about 18 months. Well, first, we take a look at the impact on our community. Rachel Barnhart got some reaction today from several business and civic leaders. News that we expected, but still something we have to adapt to.
Such a feeling of sadness today, Don. We all know Kodak is not the company that it once was, but there will be an impact, both real and symbolic.
Kodak's bankruptcy could mean the loss of jobs and retiree benefits, but it also marks a sad day in the city's history. U of R President Joel Seligman sits on Kodak's board.
Kodak was the iconic firm of Rochester. George Eastman did more than any other human being to make the city, make this university what it is today.
Kodak's imprint on Rochester is everywhere. Eastman Theater, the Memorial Art Gallery, the University of Rochester, and dozens of spin-off companies. But Kodak's decline over the last 3 decades, while painful, did not destroy the community, which has already absorbed the loss of more than 50,000 Kodak jobs.
We're not dependent on Eastman Kodak. We haven't been dependent on Eastman Kodak for a very long time.
CEO Antonio Perez called the lieutenant governor and former mayor the night before the news broke.
I think the stress in his voice and the weight on his shoulders is something that was certainly evident. You know, I'm born and raised here in Rochester. My wife spent, I think, 20 years at Kodak. My father-in-law spent a career at Kodak. I worked at Kodak between high school and college. I understand the impact that Kodak has in this town.
Kodak still has 7,000 workers in Rochester. The company owns 84 parcels that generate several $1 million in property taxes for the city. The hope is to keep what is left.
When you look at this very painful Kodak moment today, you're seeing something that's deeply symbolic. You're seeing a potential for either a further downsizing of Kodak or, at the worst, a liquidation.
In its bankruptcy filing, Kodak blamed market forces, the cost of retiree benefits, companies infringing on its patents, and even the media. But it also pointed out its connection to Rochester and said it will keep workers and retirees informed throughout this process. Reporting live on State Street, Rachel Barnhart, 13 WHAM News.
All right, thank you, Rachel. As we said, today's filing was not unexpected. We knew it was coming, we just didn't know when. Even so, there is an emotional impact on our community. Emotions including sadness, nostalgia, and, of course, some uncertainty. Alexis Arnold has some reaction now from former Kodak employees. Alexis?
Yeah, John, I think this news hits home on many levels for many people, including myself, not from this area. You think of the name Kodak and being in the birthplace of this company, the news really hit home, strikes sadness. And I spoke to many people who shared their Kodak connections with me and their hopes for the company's future.
Now, when you see all the Nikons and the Canons and all the different makes, you say, oh my God, what happened to the company? I mean, it really is very, very sad.
When I joined the company in 1969, Kodak was one of the preeminent chemical companies in the world. We had people here that everybody looked up to because of their ability. And to see, the slow degradation over the years and then the quickening degradation is very, very sad for me.
Many people say that they hope the company can emerge from this and move forward, and many current Kodak employees say that they are strongly behind their company and they are confident that they will bounce back and get back on track. Reporting live in Rochester, Alexis Arnold, 13 WHAM News.
All right, Alexis. Well, after months of sitting on edge, retirees are finally going to be getting some answers as to what exactly is going to be happening to their pensions, their benefits, their 401ks. 13 WHAM's Angela Hong tells us what they can and cannot expect. Angela?
Don, as you said, after months of virtually no communication with retirees today, Kodak posted some new information on their new website, Kodak Transforms. Now retirees know what to expect. The company says that pension plans are safe. 401ks are also unaffected. Insurance benefits are not affected for now, but Kodak says this could change. One thing the bankruptcy filings did change were payments to supplemental pension plans. Those are discontinued as of today. The retirees we spoke to today said they are frustrated. It took so long to get some sort of answer from Kodak. They wanted to be able to prepare for what was ahead, and with the future of their health benefits still up in the air, they don't know how to move forward.
Makes you a little nervous particularly because of the health insurance is what makes me nervous.
Now, Kodak also said that they plan to send out letters to all their retirees so that they know what is exactly going on, but some of that information is already available online. You can go to 13wham.com and click on the green Find It button for a link to the Kodak Transforms website, and we also have hotline numbers there you can call for more information. Live at Kodak World Headquarters, Angela Hong, 13 Wham News.
All right, Angela, and it is a very informative website for those who are associated with Kodak. While it's almost business as usual for the employees, retirees, and customers, it is not the same for Kodak shareholders. The stock is now trading over the counter.
In Kodak's case, there's an outside chance that your shares might be worth something. I don't think it would be very much. There's a greater chance that the common stock will lose all of its value.
And Kodak has also canceled next month's annual shareholders meeting. Well, sure, your mom or dad may already have retired from Kodak, maybe you too, but this is still a traumatic milestone, a day that no one would have predicted just a few years ago. As Patrice Walsh knows all so well, it is about Kodak family, right, Patrice?
And you know, Don, those of us that grew up in families, Kodak families, never expected something like this. This is not the Kodak that we remember. Not many people can say they met George Eastman. John Worth did.
George Eastman himself came into the lobby.
Worth was filling in for the receptionist at Kodak office. He didn't recognize Eastman when he walked in, so he told him, "Have a seat."
He sat down. He never said, "I'm George Eastman." And, of course, my grandfather was very embarrassed.
It wasn't just memories Worth passed on to his family, but also his love for Kodak. He worked there almost 40 years. His son, Jack, 38 years. He was a firefighter in the department at Kodak Park.
It was a very good income that he had working for Kodak. And, you know, we never wanted for anything.
If not for Kodak, Carol would not have met her future husband, John Bozick. He worked there 30 years.
We actually met there. That's where we both began in 1978.
For the Worth family and thousands of others, that Kodak paycheck put food on the table and put kids through college. And bonus day, well, that meant buying something special.
Bonus day, it was great, you know, to see how much you were going to get.
It saddens families like this to think of what Kodak once was, but they also know without it, they wouldn't be where they are today.
The good old days, yeah.
And I remember the good old days. Many people do. I know that bonus check came in handy in our household. I think it bought a few cars. I remember covering, Don, the stores here when people would get that bonus check and run in and buy some new appliances. A lot of good memories. You know, people are wishing the company well. They hope that this will help Kodak regroup and, most of all, survive in Rochester.
Yeah, and you know, a lot. I was going to say, a lot of the marketing was built around that Kodak bonus every March.
I know, a lot of good memories with that.
Thank you, Patrice, for your family report and outlook tonight. Our Kodak coverage will continue after a short break. Emotions and reaction from Kodak Park and questions about its future. Sean Carroll has learned that at least one potential buyer is at the table. What we have all known as Kodak Park continues its transformation into the 21st century, a clean tech facility. It is now called Eastman Business Park. Half of the park's 6,200 workers punch the clock at the more than 30 companies not named Kodak. 13 Wham Sean Carroll joins us live with more on the park's future. You've been out there the past few weeks, got to know some of the people pretty well, I think.
Yeah, great people out here, Don. Let's face it, it's been the case for decades. And here at the Eastman Business Park, which everybody still knows in this community as Kodak Business Park, it's a major asset that may end up being sold in this Chapter 11 proceeding. In fact, Mark Peterson over at Greater Rochester Enterprise tells me that there is already interest. In fact, one, quote, potentially viable deal is already in the works. Peterson said that he believes this will be part of the Chapter 11 reorganization as the company looks to, quote, shed core assets and future liabilities. The park fits both of those categories, but it's also a major asset for the community and economic development in this region. Kodak now leases space to some 35 companies here, including Serion Enterprises, where many of the employees spent decades working at Kodak before retiring and receiving their own pink slip. For these workers, today is bittersweet.
We're thinking of our friends and coworkers who we used to be with for years and years, and hoping that this works out for them and there's a happy ending where they can turn the situation around and everybody can still have some kind of presence here in Rochester with Kodak.
As to the park's value, it's tough to put a price tag on it, but the 9-county Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council listed it as its #1 priority when they submitted their proposals to the state just last year. Bankruptcy or not, the leaders of this park are continuing to recruit businesses as well as major projects, including one that's a $300 million biofuels facility, turning our trash into ethanol. So the future of this park likely to continue. Reporting live on Lake Ave, Sean Carroll, 13 Wham News.
All right. Hey, thank you, Sean. Well, still ahead, Glenn's wintry forecast. You saw a few of those flurries sneaking in as our reporters gave their summaries tonight. Plus, how a shrinking Kodak has actually created jobs elsewhere in our community. All right. I want to remind you there's more ahead, of course, tonight on ABC World News with Diane Sawyer. Kodak now joining a long list of Americana brands to file for bankruptcy protection. Also coming up at 7 o'clock tonight, a 13 Wham News special report on the Kodak bankruptcy. Doug Embledge, Jenny Ryan, and I will be here at 7 o'clock. And finally tonight, we close with a bright spot, shining on a man named George. Yeah, George Eastman, of course, the bank clerk who fell in love with photography in the late 1800s, a love that would embrace in time our entire community. The Kodak Tower. It's still the first thing most of us see when we fly into the Rochester airport, a shining beacon that has illuminated this community since 1914. It shines down on the Eastman Theater, the Eastman School of Music, the University of Rochester. So many landmarks that remind us of the philanthropy that started with one man, George Eastman. And he is the real bright spot here, and we must rely on the lights he left behind to illuminate this dark day and guide us to tomorrow. It is not an ending, but rather a new beginning, a new challenge like this community has met before and emerged the better for it. And we will, for we are all descendants of George Eastman. Our wives, husbands, sisters, brothers, children, and neighbors worked here after all. And it is that sense of family, a sense of community that will pull us through. For all you have given us and for the challenge to make good use of it, thanks, George.
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13
Hilarious
Wham
comedy,
News at 10.
now playing at Jiva.
CW.
130 years in Rochester.
Kodak was magical.
Today, the company that was once Rochester's biggest employer filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
While a very difficult decision, was the right decision to make at this time.
Now, somber reflection from employees as their future remains unclear.
There's a lot of we don't know yet going on.
Good evening, I'm Jenny Ryan. Jobs and retiree benefits are among the biggest unknowns for people connected to Kodak tonight. For the immediate future, the company has secured $950 million in financing from Citigroup and expects to be able to operate its business. That means paying its employees and serving its customers. Kodak expects this reorganization will take about 18 months.
We are all excited about our future. We will now be well positioned to complete our transformation and write the next chapter in the history of the world's leading material science and imaging company for the digital age.
7,000 people still work at Kodak in Rochester. We begin our team coverage with a view of what it was like to go to work at Kodak today amid news of bankruptcy. 13 Wham's Evan White is live outside Kodak headquarters downtown with a snapshot of the mood among workers. Evan?
Ginny, was mixed. Some are trying to stay positive, echoing the sentiments of CEO Antonio Perez. Others say they're simply stunned. Wendy Pinzon ran across West Ridge Road, seemingly escaping from work after one of her toughest days.
Everybody's sad. Kodak's been a part of all our lives for so many years.
Bankruptcy had been looming for weeks. Thursday, it became real.
It seemed like it would eventually happen. We just didn't think it would happen today.
Around the same time Wendy left, Ray Rocca was leaving the State Street office.
Personally very concerned. I still need a few more years before I can get full retirement benefits. We'll see what happens.
He spent the entire day in meetings with company managers who explained what Chapter 11 means.
There's a lot of we don't know yet going on.
Anthony Manella says that bankruptcy came as no surprise, and while he wants to keep his options open, his feelings toward the company are unchanged.
I love my job. I love Kodak.
As for the mood in the State Street office walls,
Quiet, somber, pretty neutral at this point. Information overload.
What would you think the mood would be? It's as expected. I mean, it's a little somber, but I think for the most part, most people are hopeful, a little optimistic.
the hope is that restructuring will help rejuvenate Kodak in a way that will allow thousands, including these three, to remain with the company. As Kodak explains on its restructuring website, it plans to keep going business as usual, continuing to pay wages for current workforce as well as benefits. To learn more about those plans, you can take a look at our website. Just click the green Find It button, 13wham.com. Reporting live at Kodak World Headquarters, Evan White, 13 Wham News.
All right, thank you, Evan. Almost as notable as the film Kodak produced was the money it donated. Kodak funding kick-started several Rochester institutions and has fueled countless others. So what happens now to Kodak's ability to make contributions? For the very answer, we turn to 13 Wham's Adam Chodak, live outside Kodak headquarters. Adam?
Well, Ginny, technically after bankruptcy, companies can still make charitable contributions. But today on its website, Kodak said this: it is likely that we will have to make difficult choices about our philanthropic investments and activities. And though Kodak's investments have been dwindling since the 90s, they have continued to fund many groups.
We are in our book room, which is the room from which educators come. They choose up to 200 books apiece through our Give Back, Give Books program.
It's one of the signature programs at the Rochester Education Foundation, a group that provides resources for city students. And Pat Browse says this program relies heavily on Kodak.
We have had wonderful, wonderful generosity from the Corporate Business Research Division. For the last 5 years, their holiday project has been collecting books.
Education, of course, has long been a target of Kodak's philanthropy, going back to George Eastman. Here's U of R's Paul Burgett.
When George Eastman's gifts are taken in the aggregate altogether, he left to the University of Rochester about $51 million. When you think about that legacy, in $1932, he arguably is one of the most important philanthropists in American higher, individual philanthropists in American higher education.
Other beneficiaries throughout the years include the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, the United Way, and then there's the Eastman School. Just before the recession, Kodak donated $10 million to renovate Kodak Hall at Eastman Theater. Still, there's no question that Kodak's philanthropy, like so much there, has faded.
And I think they've had to really prioritize in terms of what they do, but it's a reflection of their commitment in that they've continued to support many, many groups and many activities.
And the United Way sent out a written statement today. It said that Kodak and its employees have donated millions of dollars to the group over the years. And it said this news, quote, brings a depth of sadness for this company, but this community will rise up and support people in need. And this morning, we saw yet another example of Kodak's continued support of the community. Ginny, you were at the Athena Awards this morning, and as you saw, Kodak was a sponsor of that event.
So true, Adam. What a legacy. Thank you for going over that with us. So what happens next? Kodak says it hopes to reemerge from bankruptcy in 18 months. Antonio Perez says salaries and health care and other benefits will continue. The company will operate, but it remains to be seen if more workers will be laid off and if any facilities will close. For all of our coverage of this story, head to 13wham.com and click on the Kodak Bankruptcy tab. The film in the yellow box is iconic. For years, it was the only choice, especially in Rochester. But film fell out of style and Kodak struggled with the transition to digital. Tonight, we asked customers at Scott's Photo if they still feel loyal to Kodak.
I'll plan to continue to buy their stuff because they make a great product. And I have no reason to believe they won't continue to do that going into the future.
I believe in the quality of them and compared to other ones. And I have used other stuff over the time. I know Ilford Film, I know Fuji, I know Agfa Chrome. Over the years I've used a little bit of everything, but I do like Kodak.
And from Facebook, Lois said, I still believe that Kodak makes the better product, be it pocket cameras, kiosk prints, or printers. But the bankruptcy filing certainly will not send me running to buy any more big-ticket Kodak items. And Dawn says they never really got with the program when it came to digital. I never have seen a good Kodak digital camera. Their paper is still the best, and their printing. To share what's on your mind about this subject, a lot to say about it. You can log on to 13wham.com. You'll find a link to our Facebook and Twitter pages, and you can post your Kodak moments there as well. Thanks for sharing all of that tonight with us. And just ahead, 2 days to go before the next primary and one less candidate to vote for, the Republican presidential hopefuls debating in South Carolina. And in sports, why did David Beckham decide to stay in L.A.?
From your breaking news and weather authority, this is 13 Wham News at 11, now in high definition.
It put Rochester on the map, provided jobs for thousands and moments for millions.
Kodak was magical.
Tonight, bankruptcy puts the future of that magical company in serious question.
Everybody's sad. Kodak's been a part of all our lives for so many years.
A live look at Kodak Tower tonight. Employees will return to work tomorrow as Kodak says it will be business as usual during bankruptcy. Good evening, I'm Jenny Ryan.
And I'm Don Alhart. News of the filing broke just after midnight following weeks of speculation. The company will work under a financing agreement made with Citigroup. No layoffs were included in the announcement. CEO Antonio Perez blamed the decline of film, the recession, and patent infringements for putting the company in this position.
We're taking this step at this point in our transformation in order to build the strongest possible foundation for the Kodak of the future.
In its bankruptcy filing, the company said, quote, Kodak is mindful, however, of its substantial and important connection to Rochester. In particular, Kodak intends to give its Rochester stakeholders, such as its resident employees and retirees, access to information through its restructuring website, and it is a very, very thorough website at that. 7,000 people still work at Kodak here in Rochester.
That's right, and we begin our team coverage with a view of what it was like to go to work at Kodak today amid news of bankruptcy. 13 Wham's Evan White is live outside Kodak headquarters with a snapshot of the mood among the workers today. Evan?
Ginny, it was mixed. Some are trying to stay positive, echoing the sentiments of CEO Antonio Perez. Others tell us they're simply stunned. Wendy Pinzon ran across West Ridge Road, seemingly escaping from work after one of her toughest days.
Everybody's sad. Kodak's been a part of all our lives for so many years.
Bankruptcy had been looming for weeks. Thursday, it became real.
It seemed like it would eventually happen. We just didn't think it would happen today.
Around the same time Wendy left, Ray Rocca was leaving the State Street office.
Personally very concerned. I still need a few more years before I can get full retirement benefits. We'll see what happens.
He spent the entire day in meetings with company managers who explained what Chapter 11 means.
There's a lot of we don't know yet going on.
Anthony Manello says that bankruptcy came as no surprise, and while he wants to keep his options open, his feelings toward the company are unchanged.
I love my job. I love Kodak.
As for the mood in the State Street office walls,
quiet, somber, Pretty neutral at this point. Information overload.
What would you think the mood would be? It's as expected. I mean, it's a little somber, but I think for the most part, most people are hopeful, a little optimistic.
The hope is that restructuring will help rejuvenate Kodak in a way that will allow thousands, including these three, to remain with the company. As Kodak explains on its restructuring website, it plans to continue business as usual, paying the wages and benefits to its current workforce. To learn more about the company's plans, you could take a look at our website, 13wham.com. Just click on the green Find It button. It will take you to the website I just described. Reporting live from Kodak World Headquarters, Evan White, 13 Wham News.
All right, Evan. Well, the film in the yellow box is easily recognizable for many Rochesterians. It was the obvious choice, but film fell out of style. Kodak struggled with the transition to digital. Tonight, we asked customers over at Scott's Photo if they still feel loyal to Kodak.
I'll plan to continue to buy their stuff because they make a great product, and I have no reason to believe they won't continue to do that going into the future.
I believe in the quality of them and compared to other ones, and I have used other stuff over the time. I know Ilford film, I know Fuji, I know Agfa-Chrome. I mean, over the years, I've used a little bit of everything, but I do like Kodak.
And your comments as well tonight to us on Facebook. Loy said, I still believe that Kodak makes the better product, be it pocket cameras, kiosk prints, or printers, but the bankruptcy filing certainly will not send me running to buy any more big-ticket Kodak items. And Dawn said, they never really got with the program when it came to digital. I've never seen a good Kodak digital camera. Their paper is still the best, and their printing.
Almost as notable as the film Kodak produced was the money it donated. Kodak funding kickstarted several Rochester institutions and has fueled countless others. So what happens now to Kodak's ability to make more contributions? For the answer, we turn to 13 Wham's Adam Chodak, who is also live outside Kodak headquarters. Adam?
Well, Ginny, technically, after bankruptcy, companies can still make charitable contributions. But today, on its website, Kodak said this: it is likely that we will have to make difficult choices about our philanthropic investments and activities. And though Kodak's investments have dwindled since 1990, it has continued its community outreach.
We are in our book room, which is the room from which educators come. They choose up to 200 books apiece through our Give Back, Give Books program.
It's one of the signature programs at the Rochester Education Foundation, a group that provides resources for city students. And Pat Browse says this program relies heavily on Kodak.
We have had wonderful, wonderful generosity from the Corporate Business Research Division. For the last 5 years, their holiday project has been collecting books.
Education, of course, has long been a target of Kodak's philanthropy, going back to George Eastman. Here's U of R's Paul Burgett.
When George Eastman's gifts are taken in the aggregate altogether, he left to the University of Rochester about $51 million. When you think about that legacy, in 1932 dollars, he arguably is one of the most important philanthropists in American higher, individual philanthropists in American higher education.
Other beneficiaries throughout the years include the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, the United Way, and then there's the Eastman School. Just before the recession, Kodak donated $10 million to renovate Kodak Hall at Eastman Theater. Still, there's no question that Kodak's philanthropy, like so much there, has faded.
And I think they've had to really prioritize in terms of what they do, but it's a reflection of their commitment in that they've continued to support many, many groups and many activities.
And United Way did release a statement today. It said that over the years, Kodak and its employees have donated millions of dollars to the group. And it did say this news, quote, brings a depth of sadness for the community, but this community will rise up and support people in need. And then today, yet another example of how Kodak supports this community. We had the Athena Awards presentation. That was this morning, and Kodak was a sponsor. Reporting live from Rochester, Adam Chodak, 13 Wham News.
All right, thank you, Adam. Well, each of us reacted in our own way when we first heard the news today, whether we got an instant message on our smartphone or read the headline in the morning paper or watched it on the early morning news. For each of us, from different perspectives, a different snapshot that defined this Kodak moment.
It was like making friends for life because I still see a lot of the people that I worked with at Kodak. We still get together.
So I've talked to other retirees. We're all in a state of shock. It's almost like a patient is in the hospital now, and we knew that it was going to happen. We only hope that things will work out now so that Kodak can survive.
I think we can't look at Kodak as just the business. We have to look at Kodak as it's had its impact on this community, and much of what it did for this community remains.
People need to focus on where we are as a community versus the emotion. I know everybody has that emotional attachment to Kodak. It's part of our history. It's defined who we are in so many ways. That's really not the case anymore.
There's certainly going to be pain along the way, but Rochester is strong. Rochester has tremendous talent. The governor stands ready to help any way that he can.
Deeply saddening, and the hope is it's the beginning of a new Kodak and a new beginning.
I'm pretty sure that they're going to come back again, because they've been in business many years and they're a $5 million a year business, so they're going to come back strong.
Kind of sounds like what the employees said today when they came out. A little bit somber today, the whole community a little bit somber, but they're going to make it. For all of our coverage on this story, head to 13wham.com. Just click on the Kodak Bankruptcy tab.
Rochester, of course, is the heart of Kodak, but it is a brand known around the world. Viewers shared some of their Kodak moments with ABC News tonight, and we got some from our viewers, you. This one comes from Nick Swan. It's one of his parents, Norm and Irene, on a trip to England in the 1970s. This picture of John Godin was taken by his grandfather. Look at that in front of Kodak Park in the 70s. And this Kodak moment comes from Barden Geraci and Roger Chapman from the annual Kodak Family Picnic at Ellison Park.
So the question now for all of us, what happens next? Kodak says it hopes to emerge from bankruptcy in 18 months. Antonio Perez, the CEO, says salaries and health care and other benefits will continue. The company will operate, but it remains to be seen if more workers will be laid off and if any facilities will close.
Seth?
All right, yeah, Seth is in the newsroom. We had our question tonight, the first camera.
Cost of the Brownie camera.
The cost of the first Brownie camera.
Cost of the first Brownie camera was $1 with the film included.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was.
We got
a few calls. We got about 9 calls and 4 tweets. Jeff was the first caller and Tara was the first tweet.
All right. Tara out there tweeting Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, get that guy some coffee. All right. Good night.
Good night.